So good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is a fantastic opportunity to present this very innovative session to you. The University of Pennsylvania is running a 2-week conference, the Global Oral Health and Climate Action Conference, parallel and during the main conference that's happening in Belém, Brazil. And the idea of all these sessions is to generate policy recommendations, some action points that will be collated and then feed back into bigger agendas in WHO and also government agendas. So the material coming out of this session will be very much utilized and taken forward. As COP30 presidency said, we need to go from talking to action and implementation. And this, I understand, is really at the heart of this agenda. So without further ado, I will hand back to Valentina and wish you success for this tremendous session that you put together.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to invite our co-chair, Dr. Elin from Norway, to start this presentation and to introduce our speakers for today.
Thank you so much, Valentina, and hello everyone around the world. Today we come together with a shared commitment to climate resilience prevention, the visionary principle and knowledge of what it takes to ensure holistic health, all in the best interest of both children and the planet. As an advocate for children's rights to quality early childhood education and planetary well-being, I'm honored to serve as the moderator for today's webinar with you world-leading experts on a variety of approaches to our webinar on early childhood education as the first line of NCD and climate resilience prevention. My role as a doctor and professor of early childhood pedagogy and as the director of the Kintnow Research Center for Systemic Research on Education for Diversity and Sustainable Futures in Norway has reinforced my belief that in the critical importance of this topic. And I truly believe that the session today will fuel my energy even more. I will remind us all of the WHO UNICEF Lancet Commission, led by Helen Clark, stated in 2020, a future for the world's children. They write, despite dramatic improvements in survival, nutrition, and education over recent decades, today's children face an uncertain future. Climate change, ecological degradation, migration population, conflict, pervasive inequalities, and predatory commercial practices threaten the health and future of children in every country. And in the faces of this polycrisis, which significantly impacts early development, it is essential to create opportunities for bodily and emotional resilience and for joining forces across disciplines, sectors, and national borders. So I'm genuinely excited about the relevance and urgency of our discussions today and a response to this uncertainty as knowledge workers gathered here, becoming global agents for sustainability by sharing our insights and evidence. Because it is evident, beyond any doubt, that early childhood education is vital, not only for children's development and education, but also for fostering long-term resilience in our societies. So, through this webinar, we aim to raise awareness about the significance of early childhood education and emphasize that children's best interest must matter more in policy making and in everyday practices. The Bangkok Declaration from last year expressed the urgent need to intensify efforts to mitigate the substantial health, social, economic, and environmental impact of oral diseases and health systems and societies. So As a response to these concerns, we will explore recent research, insights, and ideas helpful to enhance, protect, and innovate actions, policy, and the pedagogy within the early years institutions, as well as the ecosystemic levels of society, for the supports of child life and holistic nature of development. This encompasses essential aspects such as early cognitive and social growth, foundational learning, responsive care, responsible innovation, nutrition, health, safety, and protection. And I will also mention play, because we must not forget the meaning and joy of life in all the serious concerns. Through our conversations today, we will uncover how empowering children to care for self-protection, care for others and the planet can lay the groundwork for resilient communities and societies. And we will examine a broad range of conditions fostering international collaboration to tackle the threats and challenges facing future generations. So I will now introduce to you our first speaker. It is Isabella Filusat, doctor, psychotherapist, renowned speaker, and author of numerous books from the Institute for Professional Development in Emotional Intelligence from France. So your presentation, Isabella, has the triggering title, "To Heal the Planet, we must first heal humans, the role of early emotional regulation and daily practices in the prevention of NCDs and planetary harm." So we look very much forward listening to your opening talk. So the microphone is yours, Isabel.
Thank you so much, Elin. So I am a psychotherapist, and I'm the author of more than 50 books on emotional intelligence and parenting. I was also, as a leader of positive parenting in France, the vice president of the French 1000 Days Commission. I lead 2 university diplomas, one on the 1000 Days in Lille and one on attachment, emotional skills, and trauma in Marseille. And I initiate trauma-informed policies in different cities in France. It is a great honor to be part of this global discussion about climate. I want to address a special thank you to Penn Dental Medicine University for hosting this important conference, and I'm especially grateful for the determination of Julian Fisher and for the visionary IIOPE team for integrating the topic of early childhood education into the climate discussion. And a special nod to the chain of people thanks to whom I'm here today: Katerina Tomsova, Mark Moller, Natalie Vicarini. We exist through our connections. Recent COP declarations have established a link between climate and health. The COP28 Climate Education Declaration underscored the importance of environmental education. Today, as COP30 is unfolding in Belém, I will be connecting climate, health, and education. Melting ice caps, cancer, school failure, behavioral disorders, diabetes, devastating floods, anxiety, obesity, poverty, depression, cardiovascular disease, tornadoes, attention deficit, hyperactivity, addictions. The climate crisis is not isolated. We are also facing a crisis of mental health, physical health, and social cohesion. As if we were overwhelmed firefighters, we try to fix every issue, rushing from one fire to the next. We treat, we repair, we compensate. But there will never be enough firefighters if humans' way of living keeps lighting new fires every day. All these symptoms are largely diseases of civilization, rooted in our most ordinary habits. Teaching about global warming, its causes, its consequences, is essential, but insufficient. Knowing what is at stake is not enough to change behaviors. If the climate crisis stems from human behavior, we must address the determinants of that behavior. I'm here to position early childhood relational security and the development of emotional and executive skills as the infrastructure of ecological transition. Without a solid foundation, the adult that the child will become may know about the climate issues, but lack the inner resources to act accordingly. What's the point of spending millions, billions trying to motivate people to change behaviors when something within them resists? We need to ensure the neurobiological and relational foundations that enable emotional regulation, empathy, foresight, social responsibility, respect for nature, attention, and decision making. We need to focus on human development. Not so long ago, people used to believe that a child was simply born good or bad, that their physical, emotional, and mental traits were fixed by their genes. Today, we know that a baby does not develop in isolation, but in constant interaction with the world around them. Epigenetics have revealed how nutrition, stress, and toxins can modulate gene expression, and the development origins of health and disease, the DOHAD concept, highlights that what we experience in the first 1,000 days impacts our health, our emotional and cognitive life at 40, 60, 80 years old. Cancer, obesity, diabetes, but also hyperactivity, hypersensitivity, attention deficits, emotional dysregulation, lack of empathy. Many of these challenges may find their origin in that period of great vulnerability. What if we use that precious window when the architecture of the brain and the foundations of the sensory motor skills are being built to give every child the best possible start? In a baby's brain, 1 million neural connections form every second. Interactions with caregivers and explorations literally build the architecture of the brain. Genes provide the framework, but it is the encounter with the environment that shapes the person. The child learns to feel safe in their body and in the world or not. Every movement, every gesture, every game, every daily habit also shapes the child's body, builds their bones, strengthens their muscles, tone and balance, and integrate their senses. What kind of holding and handling best nurture a baby? What kind of contact objects and habits may help or hinder a toddler's development? A child who spends too much time in a rocker or a car seat may lose tone in its back and abdominal muscles. And we need those to hold emotions, express them appropriately, and keep our body in place to be able to learn in school. What children eat, how they move, breathe, sleep, explore, love, and are loved, all of this shapes who we become. Habits mold a child's physical structure and skills. Prevention means equipping children with a healthy habit. Nasal breathing, chewing, distance vision, coordinated movements, and those are essential to be able to regulate their emotions and to focus at school. A properly positioned tongue shapes the dental arch and palate. Ensure clear airways, good ocular convergence, and supports good posture. A simple imbalance induced by a tongue tie, too much pureed food, or overuse of a pacifier can set off gradual adaptations of the jaw, the throat, the eyes, inducing a cascade of effects that can lead to learning difficulties. We can no longer consider a symptom separately from another, or an organ separately from its function. Yet today, each specialist tends to view a child's issue through the narrow lens of their field. Like the blind man and the elephant, one touches the trunk and says, it's a snake, another a leg, no, it's a tree trunk, another the ear, you're wrong, it's a giant fan. The pediatrician looks at the tonsil inflammation, the orthodontist at occlusion, the speech therapist, speech, the gastroenterologist at the microbiome, the psychologist at emotions, and each treats the child as if he was a closed system that could be fixed by replacing a part or with antibiotics as glasses, braces, or Ritalin. Our extreme specializations have led to major advances, but they have also fragmented our perspective. Very few psychologists today connect a child's anxiety to a possible gut flora imbalance or poor eye convergence. Few think to link frequent tantrums to muscle tone issues or too much cereal this morning disrupting blood sugar or lack of free playing nature. Yet, like a row of dominoes, everything is connected. Simply treating a symptom, giving asthma medication, without seeing the whole elephant, tongue dysfunction and sleep apnea, for example, not only fails to address the root cause, but may worsen it. Understanding the system and how it constantly adapts to its environment will be more efficient. The key word in living system is adaptation. What if diseases were adaptive phenomena? This is what Ødegaard suggests, and what Professor Hans Selye told us in 1951 when he coined the term stress. Searching for the common thread in all illnesses, he described the general adaptation syndrome, he later called stress. His definition? Stress is a body's effort to adapt to any demand. If we understand diseases, disorders, and behaviors as adaptations, we may interrogate what happened to the child. Now, why are children increasingly anxious and intolerant to frustration? How can we explain that they no longer know how to build forts in the trees, no longer dare to walk barefoot in the grass? And how have humans come to harm our planet so severely as to disrupt the climate and our own health? A chained elephant sways for hours, shifting from foot to foot. A stressed child becomes hyperactive, anxious, aggressive, or withdraws. In their body, elevated cortisol and blood sugar, increased inflammation. This is not pathology. It is adaptation to an unsuitable environment. Does our elephant live free in the savannah or in captivity? Is its mahout gentle or brutal? In a similar way, we cannot understand a child's behavior or health problem without considering his history, their exposure to risk factors and protective factors, the stress they endure. Stress itself is not pathological. It is an adaptive response. But chronic stress becomes toxic, especially without relational support. The still face experiment showed that when a mother's face becomes expressionless, a baby quickly shows signs of intense distress. Within minutes, the loss of synchronization, the lack of emotional response creates measurable stress in his baby. No damage is done if the mother comes back quickly enough to restore communication. Another study on adults. You're playing a virtual ball game with two avatars. Suddenly, those two start playing by themselves. After 2 minutes of being excluded from the game, you feel uneasy. After 7, your confidence wanes, and in just 10 minutes, your cognitive functions decline. Synchronization, others' responses, emotional contact, these are all biological necessities. We have to realize how deeply silent treatment, discrimination, withdrawal of love, and isolation can impact physiology, well-being, and performance. In order to thrive, a young child needs more than safety. He needs to feel safe. He needs relational safety signals. Love is not a reward, it is fuel, and a child needs it most when overwhelmed by emotions. We now know that our brains communicate, that our physiology synchronize and co-regulate. Co-regulation is a subtle dance where the adult lends their mature nervous system to the child to help them regain emotional balance. Non-communicable diseases are multifactorial, but one factor stands out. A factor so common, so pervasive, we no longer see it. The adverse childhood experiences study revealed it, childhood trauma. The higher the score, the greater the risk of chronic illness, mental disorder, addiction, and reduced life expectancy. Global data shows that 3 out of 4 people have experienced at least one traumatic event in childhood, and 1 in 8 has experienced more than 4. How many children already bear the scars of physical, sexual, or psychological violence? How can we strike, humiliate, or terrorize children? How can we remain so collectively blind to their suffering that we do not make their protection our top priority? Through the same mechanism that allows us to bomb a city, destroy human lives and ecosystems by cutting ourselves off from empathy. Through the same mechanism that allows us to raise chicken and pigs in factory farms or buy fast fashion by numbing our emotions. This mechanism is called dissociation. And once again, this is an adaptative phenomenon, unfortunately self-reinforcing, because each insensitive act cuts us off a little more. This is how our brain works. When something terrifying or overwhelming happens to us, where stress exceeds our capacity to cope, the brain triggers a neurobiological survival mechanism. It short circuits, releases numbing substances, and disconnects emotion. The memory remains trapped. That's traumatic amnesia. Pain is encapsulated. Years later, it can resurface, but we do not understand it. In addition to individual trauma, there are echoes of collective traumas that we have not been able to heal. We carry so many unresolved traumas that we must maintain this dissociation to avoid being overwhelmed by suffering. A traumatized person is at risk of illness, risky or avoidant behaviors, drinking, exposing themselves to shocking content like pornography, ultraviolence, or becoming violent themselves. Always with the same goal, to numb the pain. Armed conflicts, ecological destruction, climate disruption, domestic violence, and violent education are not separate. They are different manifestations of the same collective dissociation. Numbing enables violence, which in turn creates new trauma. Not every traumatized person becomes violent, but one aggressor can create many victims, and inevitably, generation after generation, the number of aggression grows. That could be why our society is so brutal, even though scientists have proven that we are a highly social and empathetic species. We humans are not irresponsible or inherently violent. We are dissociated. This is why superficial appeals to respect nature are insufficient to change behaviors. We must reclaim control over our automatic responses. We must develop trauma-informed policies, recognize and heal individual and collective traumas to reclaim our sensitivity, our connection to life, and finally be able to behave responsibly. And guess what? Teaching psychosocial skills, understanding one's own emotions and others, building positive relationships, shows the highest level of evidence for reducing trauma's impact. We must integrate this powerful protective factor in educational programs, remembering that executive functions and emotional regulation depend on a functional breathing body. Prevention is not just acting early, it is acting differently. It is recreating the natural conditions for harmonious growth. The child is a learning system. Life self-regulates, repairs, and adjusts if we allow it to. Elephants are true ecosystem engineers. clearing bushes, creating light corridors and water sources for all animals, regenerating the forest, fostering carbon storage, and look at them. When an elephant calf is born, the whole herd raises it. If a baby falls, 10 trunks reach out to lift it. The adults adjust their pace to match the young ones. When a calf is in distress, the others draw near, surround it, touch it with their trunk, and emit soothing sounds. They console it. They synchronize their physiologies. To reverse climate disruption, prevent wars and diseases, we must pace the rhythms of our children, care for them, nurture their emotional intelligence in a functional body. And in all our relationships with adults and children, prioritize relational safety. Love. Yes, love. That word we dare not speak, though it is the structuring force of life. It is time to include children in the climate equation, to stop the snowball we already see growing before it becomes an avalanche. Investing in the first 1,000 days is the most profitable investment our societies can make for health, education, the economy, social peace, and the planet. Caring for our children, they will take care of the world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Isabel, for your lovely message. I will keep in mind your message of love is the fuel, and I will also remember the elephants. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Ursula Stenger, whom I first met at the breakfast table in Shanghai. You are Doctor Professor of Educational Science with the focus of early childhood at the University of Cologne. And your title is Empowering Early Childhood Education for Climate Resilience and Sustainable Future through Health Practices. We are so looking forward to listening to you, Ursula. So the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. Start my talk, and it fits perfect to the talk before, because I am starting with physical, mental, and social and planetary well-being under serious threat. More and more children worldwide are affected by mental and physical health problems. We heard about this. Live with violence, wars, poverty, neglect, malnutrition, or obesity. Suffer from emotional and behavioral disorders partly associated with excessive screen time. So, social ecological crises are increasingly affecting children, bodily, physically, by heat, pollution, and so on, and causing stress and climate anxiety that intensifies in youth with hopelessness about common livable futures. Worldwide, more and more teachers also are affected from stress and anxiety, burnout, depression, exhaustion, caused by structural problems and the emotional demands of overlapping crises. What about the children's perspective on this? Talking with 6-year-old children in a daycare center in Germany about Earth's well-being, a student of mine did this talk with the children. The children say, the Earth is suffering and struggling under the impact of human activity. Emil says, I'm also afraid because if the Earth is angry with us, why are we even alive? It doesn't make any sense if the Earth doesn't want us here. So I wish for the Earth that things will get better for it or her at some point, and that people will eventually understand that it's really about the Earth, not just about themselves, about their own health. It's also about the Earth, because without the Earth, we couldn't live. And Lucas? Yes, and besides, the Earth created me, and we can be happy about that and be thankful for it. So we see that 6-year-old children know the interconnectedness of one's own health and the Earth health. And I speak about this interconnectedness of the well-being and resilience on these levels. And I ask, is early childhood education focused towards the possible futures that await children? What fundamental experiences and different types of everyday practices also for physical and mental health are helpful for children, families, and educators in coping with crisis and developing health and well-being, hope, compassion, and resilience in order to live well with each other and with the earth. And in these times of crisis, I think preventive mental and physical health care is important, both in daily practices, regular practices, and as an integral part of everyday life. And I start with the regular practices for physical or bodily mental health. Physical health, I now talk about some studies. Connection between sports activity and physical and mental health is proved. Also, the importance of body hygiene for development. And we see the influence of kindergarten environment and professional qualification on the development of preschool children's physical fitness. So, and mental health, physical well-being of preschool children, we see that mindfulness and yoga-based socio-emotional learning interventions are very helpful. And a project from Tanya Singer, resource project, very interesting, shows that different mindful interventions cause different training effects on subjective experience, behavior, brain, and body. Comparing practices focus on 3 types: present moment attention and incorporation, interconception, socio-emotional processes such as compassion and loving kindness, or can focus on metacognitive process and perspective taking on self and others. So we should know what we choose when we do interventions. So I present now or say that different kinds of health practices in early childhood are required. The regular practices have positive mental and physical effects on individuals and groups, but it is important to ensure compatibility with the respective ecological, economic, socio-cultural situations with stakeholders and places. And mental and physical health is reframed as a cross-cutting dimension for individuals, communities, and the planet, as needed resilience and coping strategies in daily practice, in the regular daily practice of daycare centers, like nature-based activities or art, music, imaginative play, and so on. Everything which we have in everyday life can focus on this aspect of body and mental health. What is needed to cope with the crisis is a kind of community resilience, planetary resilience, and regenerative practice for exhausted humans living well with more than humans, other living beings, and distracted Earth landscapes like water, air, and soil. So, what do children need in future they will face to stay healthy? And I point out 4 points. The first is vital, emotional, loving relationships for resilience, as Isabel told before. Vital, meaningful, empathic relations and experiences with others and with natures are quite important to ground the resilience. To learn to articulate and process emotions of grief or anger, cultivating emotions of gratitude and fulfillment, and so on, e.g. with arts or rituals. Also to learn to be self-aware, self-empowered, and connected, and to realize oneself also as a part of a community and an earth inhabitant. The ability, I quotation Elwell, the ability to feel, think, and act for the well-being of oneself, others, and the environment is important. And now I point out an example in a daycare center, which has birds outside the daycare center, and I now talk about what could children think or feel? How do the birds feel? How can they have empathy for the birds? So they can feel their joy in spring, that they are hungry in winter, or they find dead birds, and they feel all this with compassion as interconnectedness with human lifestyles, because the birds' lives are connected with the humans' lives, and they first had the compassion for the birds. So, the second aspect is the confidence in the future with ethical orientation and responsibility. So the children learn visioning, what really matters in life, create alternative imaginations and narratives for living well together, and focus and fulfilling aspects. Because values and visions guide strategies and actions, and children should recognize implicit values and value conflicts also in everyday life, reflect them critically, make them discussable, different options visible. Should we buy bird food in the winter, or should we buy new toys for the children? This is a conflict. So we need a value-based education, learning to take responsibility for the impacts of one's actions on others and on the earth, for ethically caring for and with the earth, as Hug said, to be able to apply conflict resolution strategies. I come to the birds again. So I did ask the question, should teacher and children buy food for birds in winter or new toys? What values guide these actions? What futures are possible? Sharing the place and living together as a value that brings togetherness, happiness, and gratitude. The third point, which is very important for this kind of sustainable resilience, which I want to point out, it's knowledge and critical thinking, the cognitive aspect, to realize what is important for shared worlds. Critical thinking about all global interrelationships, to be able to use problem-solving strategies and to communicate knowledge and cooperate about sustainability, healthy lifestyles. And also what kind of didactics is necessary for the teachers to be able to support learning situations which allow the children to make the experience of interconnected shared worlds in early childhood education. I come back to the example of the birds. What's about knowledge? Because it's not only to love the birds, to feel the birds, to reflect what is necessary for the bird on an ethical issue, but also learning how the birds live with us in changing environments, with agriculture, pesticides, and climate change, significant decline in insects and birds. So to understand this interconnectedness is important, because the dependence on seed dispersal and pollination by insects for our food is necessary for our living and for the birds' living. So I come to the last point of my 4 points. It's that we need transformative practice and community building for shared healthy worlds, because it's necessary that children have the opportunity to an active participation in sustainability issues. Children and adults, as Elliot says, empowered decision makers, action takers, and problem solvers for sustainability. And as Cook and al. Says, everyday steps towards creating healthier environments for themselves and others in ways that are good for planetary health. So regenerative field and place-based learning could be very helpful, because children can learn how it works, a pedagogy and a living together with other living beings, with other humans in that place where I'm living and where I can make the experience. And I bring another example about disaster resilience, which I think it's very important. And I did a research in an area which was flooded in Germany, and many people died, and also daycare centers were flooded, and we make a research there. And we found out that it's necessary, 2 points are quite important to create daycare as a safe place with infrastructural support, and from this they can help, the teachers and the kindergarten leader can help to collaborate with families and communities for psychological, physical, aesthetic, and spiritual trauma-sensitive practices for community resilience. And I mention also a book, Embrace of Compassion, from the Indian Ocean tsunami. It's about Amma. Maybe you know her. It's a book from Ramesh. And there you can also find the central aspects and elements which create community resilience in case of a disaster, like a flood, and tremendous flood there, the tsunami. And I come back to the birds. So what practice is helpful for the children to get this connection intensified with nature? Here in the example of the birds, children feed the birds, give them water in summer when it's hot. They listen to them, they observe each other, and they bury dead birds at the daycare center when they find them. So understanding the interconnection and the connection also between agriculture, food, birds, insects, and enjoying bird-friendly and insect-friendly food. So there they understand sustainable aspects, and they can connect with these aspects to get more resilient. And I come to my conclusion, my last slide. It's about creating healthy environments for greater resilience for individuals, communities, and the planet. With special regular exercises, as I told you, health, education, and integration into everyday life can lead to healthier habits and interests. How can we promote this? It's necessary to have a professionalization with a focus on health and preventive body and mental health in everyday life and in regular practice. To be aware how important it is, and to also to change, to have the focus from governments, management, and also from curriculums on these topics of physical, mental, and planetary health. We need also healthy environments, healthy food, healthy habits, and partnerships with parents and local communities to foster these focus on health prevention and resilience. The aim is to create cultures of sustainability, resilience, and health in daycare centers with meaningful relationships, emotional relationships, confidence in the future, responsible acting and learning for a shared, fulfilling life. And people who care about health can also be mobilized for sustainability and resilience through a shared local experience. So I finish my talk with our other mother, Earth, and the interconnections of health for human beings, other human beings, and other living beings on the Earth and the planet themselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ursula, for bringing us into these principles, as well as this beautiful example with the birds. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As I already said in the opening, I serve as a professor and director of the Kintnau Center for Systemic Research on Diversity and Sustainable Futures in Norway. So my title is Embedding Movement, Play and Exploration in Early Childhood Education Systems as Everyday Pedagogies for Public and Planetary Health. So what I will do is that I will go through, try to respond to 2 questions. So the first one, which pedagogical foundational practices must educators do to support children in the moment-to-moment practice and in the long run to enable population-level resilience? And I will also try to respond to the question of how can high-quality early childhood education offer a response to the climate crisis? So in the end, I will tell a story. So the ideas of planetary care and holistic development and early childhood education have evolved through various historical phases, influenced by social, cultural, and scientific advancements. So I would like to start to go far back. So how did quality early childhood education look like? If we are looking back to the 17th century, when Johann Amos Comenius published what many consider to be the first picture book dedicated to education of the youngest children. It was Orbis Sensualium Pictus, or the world of things obvious to the senses, drawn in pictures. So this book can be seen to be as much about pedagogy of early childhood. So when you can look at the picture here, you can see the pedagogue and the child, here a boy. And you can see that in the picture, they are situated in an open landscape, out in nature, but also with the city or the little village behind them. You can see that it is a planetary system. You can see the sun, you can see the sky and the air. So in this book, the role of the pedagogue was to take the child by the hand and walking to explore and discover the richness and connections of the world by the senses. And you can also see in the book, it is 2 columns here, one with the mother tongue, the other in Latin, which was a revolutionary at the time when the book was printed. You know, and I will also point to some of the early foundations of childhood, which established in our culture childhood as a unique stage. So, and I will begin again with Johann Amos Comenius. He was advocating universal education. So, as we saw in the last picture, taking the child by the hand and show the child all aspects of the world. But also later, Friedrich Fröbel and Maria Montessori established the notion that childhood is unique and valuable stage of human development. Their philosophies emphasized the importance of play, exploration, social interaction, laying the groundwork for holistic approaches and hands-on material for early intervention, no, early education. So you can see that the senses is very, very crucial here. So what we can see by the evolution of early childhood pedagogy and the knowledge for the educators, we can see that the child has always been connected to the planet, to the local, the situated, and as well as the global, and the micro and the macro at the same time. We can be reminded by John Dewey and naturalistic education, where the idea of the children with close to nature and environment, and schools implementing outdoor learning, encouraging also relationship with the planet and scientific methods of discovery. We can see it in Piaget and Vygotsky and child development theories, the idea of learning as a social and psychological process, emphasizing the importance of environment and social context. We also can find it in Uri Bronfenbrenner and other ecological frameworks, the idea of system theory with multiple layers of influence, as a child development with family, community, societal factors beyond the classroom. And we can also see it in the political laws and regulation with children's rights implementation in national laws and regulations, children's voices and participation, which enriches, new ways of bringing the child voices to the front and to respond and act upon the children's voices. We can see it in environmental education and the growing of sustainability awareness. Early childhood education began integrating concepts of sustainability and planetary care, promoting value, use of stewardship and responsibility towards the planet, very much integrated in Nordic early childhood education frameworks. And also in holistic pedagogy, not only for cognitive and social emotional learning, but also integrating physical health, environmental awareness, and ethical citizenship towards nurturing the whole child, as also, the two previous speakers has so beautifully also addressed. Early childhood education and care institutions are uniquely positioned to foster conditions that promote meaningful lives, resilience, adaptability, and strong health, and transformative agency. I can see that my points is so connected to yours, Ursula, with your 4 principles. To support child health and well-being, we need a comprehensive understanding of the relational conditions that contribute to growth and to long-term public health. Also, I will bring up James Heckman and his powerful knowledge about high quality early interventions are a wise and profitable investment, yielding high returns in terms of better economic, health, and social outcomes for individuals and societies. So how does high quality early childhood education and care look like today? And how can we strengthen the quality gaps between institutions? I will bring forward one of our projects in our Kinnow Research Center. It is a large intervention study that's called Movement, Play and Exploration. We work with co-creation and intervention in 48 early childhood and care institutions in Norway, led by Professor Ødegaard. And we can here see that we want to integrate movement, play, and exploration in all our principles, and to shape rich physical environment, to create possibilities for meaningful participation, to shape a good balance in between challenging the child and supporting the child, and to shape good dialogues, both between actions and words and language. So now I come to my story. This story was created by a teacher. He was encouraged to tell how he worked in one of our projects. So I would like his voice to come forward now. So he tells the story of one day in a kindergarten, and one of the children came up to him and said, "What does it mean to be alive?" He says, "This question came up in a conversation I had with the children one day, and my immediate answer was that we must breathe to be alive." And he explained, we take a deep breath into our lungs and let the air go out again. So I found a feather, and the children could try to breathe on the feather to check if they were alive. All the children in the group made the feather move by breathing on it, and we could with relief establish that all of us were alive. Several more questions about what was alive and what was not came up, and it was not easy for me to find the good answers to all their questions. So that's why we agreed that we could go in the wood next day to find out if we could find anything alive there. But it was winter and a light snow covered the ground, so I was not quite sure what would be the result of our little expedition the next day. We could not expect to find small insects because it was winter. Well, we did not go far, only 100 meters right outside the fence of the kindergarten to a small wood. We stopped at one of the big trees there. Is the tree alive? I asked. They were quiet. Everyone looked like they were listening to something. However, we did not hear any breathing sounds from the tree. So maybe the tree does not breathe. Maybe the tree did not live. Some of the children went close to the tree, touched it, listened, and started sniffing the bark. Is the tree breathing? I asked it gently and touched the bark of the tree. The children did not respond immediately, but then a boy wondered if he heard a mouse breathing. We listened again, and another child stated that the tree could not breathe because it didn't have a mouth. Maybe it can breathe in other ways, I suggested, maybe through the leaves. However, there were no leaves on the tree since it was winter, so I could not prove myself right at that moment. We therefore instead started to feel the moss, and after a while we moved to a small ridge. I suggested we lay down to think about what it meant to be alive. We lay down in a star format and breathed deeply together. I think the trees rest in the winter, I said, while lying there. I think they rest as we do now. And when spring comes and the leaves returns to the trees, we can see that the tree is alive. So that was the story of the teacher. And then I will go back to the Lancet Commission that reminds us and give us also some help on the way for policy development. They suggest something for us all, and that what is needed for children. They need to be protected. They need to be educated. And they need to be heard. They need to have a good health, and they need to be treated fairly. When it comes to the education, that is my topic here. The Lancet states that high quality and safe primary school and specifically early childhood education and for children with disability is important. Child-centered and child-friendly education is important. As my example, could establish an example of that, as a response to children's questions to go and explore. And furthermore, they say that education need to also include respect for natural environment and for sustainable development. And they emphasizes life skill education, promoting healthy behavior, including personal hygiene, stress management, nutrition, and self-care. And also they remind us of the importance of community-based education, challenging gender roles and stereotyped and harmful practices. And also, I will give attention to their recommendation of time and space for age-specific and inclusive play and creativity. So, thank you for the intention. And then after me now, Professor Adele Diamond. And the title of your speech is Why Attention to Executive Functions Early in Life is So Critical for Disease Prevention and Health Throughout Life. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'd like to start by thanking the people who took such fantastic care for over 10,000 years of the land where I live and work. I'm speaking from the ancestral, unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Executive functions are critical for physical and mental health and for success in all areas of life. There's a bidirectional relation between executive functions and the brain's prefrontal cortex on which they depend, and the health of our planet and of our bodies. While exposure to polluted air or water, exposure to stresses such as food insecurity, lack of shelter, disasters like flooding and hurricanes caused by climate change impair executive functions, it's also true that solving those problems, making the right decisions and following through with the right behaviors to address the global climate crisis requires strong and healthy executive functions. While the brain remains plastic throughout life and executive functions can be improved at any age, the physical, social, and emotional environments to which children are exposed in the early years plays a disproportionate role in shaping executive functions and a person's health throughout life. That our well-being and the well-being of our planet are intimately tied together, and that different aspects of the human being, cognitive, spiritual, social, emotional, and physical, are intimately tied together, is particularly clear in the context of executive functions. I'll unpack those statements and provide hard scientific evidence for them. But first, I'll start by explaining what executive functions are. Executive functions refers to a family of mental processes needed whenever going on automatic or relying on instinct or intuition would not be a good idea. There are three core executive functions. I'll start with inhibitory control. Inhibitory control at the level of attention is focused attention or selective attention, being able to inhibit distractions so you can focus and stay focused. You need selective attention, for example, when you're trying to focus on what someone's saying in a noisy restaurant. Being able to hone in on a ball in a sea of distraction or when it blends in with the background. Inhibitory control at the level of attention to what you're holding in mind is cognitive inhibition. To really listen to another person, staying fully in the present moment, giving that person your full undivided attention, you need cognitive inhibition. You need to set aside your own worries and preoccupations, ruminating about an error you just made, thinking about what you need to do next, trying to anticipate where that person's train of thought is going, or whether you're sufficiently in tune with the person. Inhibitory control at the level of behavior is self-control or response inhibition, resisting temptations, not acting impulsively, thinking before you speak or act. Examples of when self-control are needed include things like taking only what you need, not interrupting someone who's speaking, not eating foods that might taste good but aren't good for you, not blurting out the first thing that comes to mind, resisting hurting someone just because that person hurt you, resisting acting in the heat of the moment. Discipline and perseverance requires self-control to resist the many temptations to quit and not finish what you started. The second core executive function is working memory, holding information in mind and working or playing with it. Working memory is critical for making sense of anything that unfolds over time, for that always requires holding in mind what happened earlier and relating that to what's happening now. So for example, you need working memory to relate what I'm saying now to what I said earlier or to other information you've heard or to your own experience. Working memory enables us to mentally play with ideas and relate ideas and facts to one another, so necessary for reasoning and problem solving. Understanding cause and effect, like the relation between our behaviors and climate disasters. Reflect on the past, comparing the present situation with past ones, and to consider the future. Mentally evaluate various possible courses of action. The third core executive function is cognitive flexibility, being able to see situations from different perspectives, think about something in a whole new way. An example of seeing things from a different perspective: when my son Eric was in first grade, his teacher asked the class, "What's the color of apples?" Most of the children answered red, a few said green. Eric said white. The teacher tried to explain that apples could be red, green, and sometimes golden, but never white. Eric said, "Look inside." An example of poor cognitive flexibility is given by Alexander Graham Bell. He said, "When one door closes, another door opens, but we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the ones which open for us." Cognitive flexibility also includes having the flexibility to seamlessly adjust to change or the unexpected, taking advantage of a sudden opportunity, finding ways to get around an unexpected problem, and even to admit you were wrong when you get more information. If there's a problem we haven't been able to solve, can we think outside the box to conceive of the problem, frame the problem in a whole new way, come up with a completely different way of attacking it? The global situation can change rapidly. It's important to quickly and wisely respond to those changes, flexibly switching plans in real time, flexibly working with others to address the needs of all, flexibly adjusting in real time to the unexpected. From these three core executive functions, higher order executive functions are built, like problem solving, reasoning, planning, strategizing. And problem solving and reasoning are what fluid intelligence is. Executive functions are important for all aspects of life. Take, for example, success in school. Executive functions have been found to be more predictive of academic and career success than socioeconomic status or IQ. For example, executive functions predict the school success in high-risk children independent of IQ. Evidence indicates that discipline accounts for over twice as much variation in final grades as does IQ. Consider success in the workplace. Poor executive functions are associated with poor productivity and difficulty finding and keeping a job. On the other hand, good executive functions, such as creative problem solving, are related to success on the job and are highly sought after qualities by employers. Many, many studies have found that executive functions are important for physical and mental health. For example, a large study of 14,000 teens found that those with poor inhibitory control are exponentially more likely to suffer from 9 of 10 adverse health conditions. You need good working memory to remember doctor's orders, good inhibitory control when medical advice is for you to alter your behavior, and good discipline to stick with an exercise regimen. Many issues are not simply education issues or health issues, they're both. Executive functions are important for academic achievement and for mental and physical health. We are fundamentally social. We need to belong, we need to fit in and be liked. Executive functions are important for making and keeping friends, building and maintaining alliances, and working with people with diverse perspectives. Persons with poor executive functions are often more difficult to get along with. They often respond impulsively or rudely, interrupting others and not waiting their turn. They may be less dependable and forget the rules that everyone agreed to play by. Poor executive functions are associated with worse marital harmony, aggression, emotional outbursts, not obeying societal norms. Self-control saves us from putting our foot in our mouth or making a social faux pas. Think of all the trouble you'd get in if you told your boss what you really thought of him or her, grabbed whatever you wanted without asking or paying, or did others socially inappropriate or hurtful things. In short, executive functions are essential for mental and physical health, success in school and in life, and cognitive, social, and psychological development. And thus, executive functions have been called the mental toolkit for success. Executive functions depend on prefrontal cortex and the other brain regions with which it's interconnected. Prefrontal cortex takes a very long time to fully mature, over 2 decades. So here you can see that even at 20 years of age, you see some green in the prefrontal regions of the brain shown here. And green indicates immaturity. The blue and the violet is the mature areas of the brain. Just because prefrontal cortex isn't fully functional when you're young doesn't mean that it isn't functional at all, though. Take, for example, a 2-year-old's legs. They're not at their full adult length. It'll be for maybe 15 years till they're at their full adult length. But with those immature legs, a 2-year-old can walk, a 2-year-old can even run. That is to say that even though prefrontal cortex is immature early in life, it can subserve executive functions to some extent, even in the youngest children. Not to the full adult level, but to some extent. And with training and practice, it can do it better. Although prefrontal is very immature early in life, during early infancy, it is already subserving elementary versions of the highest cognitive functions. So, for example, here's a hiding task where you hold up something the baby really wants. The baby watches you hide it in one of 2 places, and then you cover both places with identical covers and make the baby wait before the baby can reach. So the baby has to hold in mind, has to remember where you put it. And now when he acts, he can't see the thing he really wants. Instead, he acts on something he could care less about, which is the cover. He acts on the cover in order to get the thing he wants. That's exercising a plan. That's problem solving. Here's another example. This baby is only 7.5 months old, and there's a transparent box there. And inside it is something she wants. She can see through the top, but the top is closed. Only the front is open. And babies at this age need to look through the side they're reaching in order to be able to reach in. So she executes a plan. She raises the box up, and now she can see in and she can reach to get what she wants. At 9 months, you see this on the side. They bend over to look in the side opening, and they need to continue to look in order to reach in. So they recruit the contralateral hand in order to be able to stay in that position and still reach and get their goal. Again, creative problem solving, 9 months of age. We're not born with the brains we live with. We build brains through experience. Neuroplasticity finds the pinnacle of its expression in prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is the most malleable area of the brain. Already in the first year of life, children's experiences are shaping their prefrontal cortex and their executive functions. For example, already by 7 months of age, infants regularly exposed to bilingual input at home have better executive functions than infants exposed to only one language. Motor development and cognitive development are fundamentally intertwined. Walking on a log demands and challenges focused attention. Sibel Raver and colleagues found the ability to walk on a balance beam was a particularly sensitive measure of executive functions in young children. And we in our lab are finding that just 15 minutes of practicing balance exercises, only 3 days a week for 12 weeks, improves not only balance, but also executive functions. Sitting upright plays a critical role in infant cognitive development. Mindfulness practices involving movement, like Tai Chi and Taekwondo, have shown by far the best results for improving executive functions of all the different methods tried thus far. These activities help children learn to stay focused on the present moment. These activities also help them learn to control their breathing and thus control their arousal. The physical environment where an activity is done also matters. Katerina Pesky and colleagues conducted a randomized control trial with 5 to 10-year-old children, in which they contrasted 6 months of enriched physical activity versus traditional physical activity. Children in enriched physical activity improve more in inhibitory control than children in traditional PE, but only when the enriched PE took place outdoors was this effect seen. A study found that children with ADHD concentrated better after walking in a park. In fact, the effect sizes were so impressive that the authors suggested that doses of nature might serve as a safe and inexpensive way to manage ADHD symptoms. But being open to the effects of experience cuts both ways. Experience can harm prefrontal and executive function development, just as it can help it. Prefrontal cortex is the newest area of the brain over the course of evolution and the most fragile and the most vulnerable. For example, when infants or children eat can affect how their prefrontal cortex and executive functions develop. People born with PKU, phenylketonuria, cannot digest an amino acid found in protein. If a PKU child's diet restricts protein, but not quite enough, that impairs prefrontal cortex, but not other areas of the brain because of the special properties of prefrontal cortex. The upshot of that is that already in the first year of life, executive functions are impaired. So remember the hiding task I showed you? That's called A not B. And here you can see the red line are children with PKU with higher phenylalanine levels. And already in the first year of life, they are showing impairments on this compared to other PKU children with lower phenylalanine levels, their own siblings, match controls, etc. Remember the transparent box I showed you? That's called the object retrieval task. Again, you see the same results, even at 7, 8, 9, 10 months of age. Even in young children, poorer quality sleep, disrupted sleep, results in worse executive functions, especially worse inhibitory control and working memory. Sleepy children have poor executive functions. Sleep-disordered breathing impairs the executive functions of preschoolers and impairs prefrontal cortex function. We can all think of multiple environmental factors that impact sleep. A brain region called the amygdala sends out alarm signals whenever there's any sense of danger in the environment, such as when you see an angry or fearful face. Normally in adults, when there's really no danger, prefrontal cortex sends a message to the amygdala that it can stop firing because all is well. So when activation of prefrontal cortex goes up, activation of the amygdala goes down. But prefrontal cortex does not appear to spontaneously regulate the amygdala early in life. In infants and young children, though prefrontal activation increases, amygdala activation keeps increasing too. Prefrontal tries to tell the amygdala to calm down, but the message does not get through. The connection between prefrontal and the amygdala is still too immature. Early in life, for prefrontal activation to result in reduced amygdala activation, the presence of a reassuring, loving, dependable attachment figure seems to be needed. The environmental experience of being with an attachment figure seems to serve as a neuroscaffold that lays out the blueprint by which stable patterns of brain connectivity are expressed and shaped. Attachment is what we call the love between a baby and a caregiver. Secure attachment is the cornerstone for everything else in life. Having good executive functions, good interpersonal relations, doing well in school, having the courage to explore and take risks. But the term attachment, before the term attachment existed, Eriksen called this basic trust, which he defined as knowing beyond any shadow of a doubt that you're loved, feeling the world is basically a good, safe, trustworthy place, where you'll be helped if you need it, where things make sense and are predictable. He considered this the cornerstone of a healthy personality. It's well established that parents act to buffer their children's emotional and physiological reactivity, fearfulness, and anxiety. Increasing evidence suggests that parents achieve that emotional and physiological buffering via prefrontal projections to the amygdala. Children need, we all need, to feel cared about, valued, and safe. A major source of stress for many children even in the first year of life, is the stress they sense their parents are experiencing. All of us, even the youngest infants, are affected by the feelings of those around us. Infants can sense when the person taking care of them is anxious, and that induces anxiety in the infants. An example is when my mother gave me my very first bath as a baby. She was terrified that she might drown or hurt this very fragile baby, so she was very anxious. And I could sense her anxiety, and I started crying. And my father got very concerned that his daughter is crying so badly. He was afraid his wife was doing something awful. So my mother went downstairs to get a neighbor who already had 3 children and was experienced. When the neighbor came up and took me in her arms, I immediately calmed down and stopped crying. I could sense not only my mother's anxiety, but the calmness of this stranger who I had never met before. And this was a newborn. The synchrony between the caregiver reacting to the infant's affect at 3 months of age and the mutual synchrony between caregivers and infants' affect at 9 months of age each predict the child's self-control at 2 years of age. The mutual regulation of affect in infancy is an important contributor to the emergence of self-regulation and self-control. If you're stressed, you can't be the parent or teacher you want to be. If you're stressed, your children will pick up on it. It will cause them to feel stressed. And if they're stressed, their executive functions will suffer. Even your stress before the baby is born negatively impacts the baby. The effect of mother stress during pregnancy. Paul Patterson showed that artificially activating a mother's immune system in the absence of infection produces offspring with behavioral and brain abnormalities consistent with those seen in schizophrenia or autism. It seems it's not the mother's flu infection that increases the risk that our fetus might later develop autism or schizophrenia. Rather, it's the immune response that the mother's body mounts in response to the infection that seems to affect infant brain development. And the mother's body mounts the very same immune reaction in response to stress. Stress early in life impacts the development of prefrontal and executive functions. It doesn't have to be something as awful as physical or sexual abuse. It can be feeling there's no one you can count on, parents arguing a lot, or parents being very worried about whether they'll have a roof over their head or food on the table. For adults who as children experience significant stress, prefrontal is unable to effectively communicate with and thus unable to calm down the amygdala. The functional communication isn't working. Although they recruit prefrontal cortex, amygdala activity is not correspondingly reduced. So the blue line here shows what I told you before. When prefrontal activation goes up, amygdala activation goes down. The red line is for other adults who as children experience stress. And here, even though prefrontal activation is going up, amygdala activation continues to go up. The person stays in an anxious, hypervigilant state, constantly on the alert for possible danger, easily and overly panicked, immobilized by things that provoke anxiety. Key to improving executive functions or any skill is practice. Not only that, executive functions need to be continually challenged to see improvements, not just practiced, but continually challenged. And that's true for being excellent at anything. It's the hours of practice, pushing yourself to keep improving, that drives the benefits. Although training and challenging executive functions is needed for them to improve, that alone is not enough to achieve the best results. It's also important to indirectly support executive functions by lessening things that impair them, like anxiety or stress, and enhancing things that support them, like joy or feelings of belonging. Some of the best activities for touching the hearts and minds of young people, inspiring them, challenging them to reach for the stars, building their self-confidence and pride, and improving their executive functions are traditional activities that have been around for millennia. Activities in the great outdoors, for example, including these: taking care of an animal, sports, For tens of thousands of years across all cultures, storytelling, dance, art, music, and play have been part of the human condition. People in all cultures made music, sang, danced, told stories, played sports, and created beautiful works of art. There are good reasons why those activities have lasted so long and arose everywhere. These activities require and train cognitive flexibility, perseverance, focused attention, planning, creative problem solving, indeed all the executive functions. And besides challenging executive functions, they make us happy and proud, inspire self-confidence, address our social needs, and help our bodies develop. So these activities directly improve executive functions because they challenge them and train them, but they also indirectly support executive function in all these other ways. In closing, planetary health, human health, and social justice are fundamentally interrelated. All of these relate in complex ways, and they both affect executive functions and can be helped by having good executive functions. It's also true that the different parts of the human being are fundamentally interrelated. Each part, cognitive, spiritual, social, emotional, and physical, is affected by and affects the others. Nourishing all the aspects of a person may be key to that person being able to problem solve, exercise self-control, and display any of the other executive functions to the full extent of which he or she is capable. We have to care about nurturing these early in life because that affects everything that comes after. The seeds for wise, caring, healthy adults are planted in the first years of life. We reap what we sow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Adele. I'm nearly speechless. It was so many lessons to learn for us all here, and so extremely relevant knowledge for early childhood teachers to learn to be good educators for children. So thank you very much for this very inspiring and insightful talk. It is now time for me to introduce you, Dr. Joelle Muncy, Doctor of Neuroscience, Institute of Psychology, Canada. You will take us into the world of neuroscience with the title Neurophysiological and Psychosocial Determinants of Early Childhood Mental Resilience and Oral Health Behavior in the context of climate stress. So the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. It's an honor for me to be with you today. I'm pleased to support effort to improve conditions for children's development, especially regarding oral health. The well-being of children is a matter of importance as society addresses significant environmental and climate change. To promote healthy development, it's essential that intervention and policies are implemented to prevent or mitigate the impact of childhood adversity. Psychiatry is a powerful and essential clinical science. However, we have two limitations affecting the diagnostic process. The definition of psychiatric disorder emerged from consensus, but not from the measurement of biological markers. These definitions are sometimes too many focused on the effect of pharmacological molecules modifying behavior. To promote optimal child development, the aim of the guideline is to detect psychosocial and academic challenge at the early stage. This objective is well-intentioned. However, many countries are struggling with a huge increase of the prescription of psychotropic medication. In the previous year, we realized a large report detailing the trends in psychotropic drug usage over the past 2 decades in Quebec. The following graph presents the annual consumption of these medications across 5 distinct age groups, respectively for girls and boys. E and B, psychostimulant to moderate ADHD symptoms. C and D, intuitive to decrease impulsivity. E and F, antidepressant to reduce the intensity of the symptoms of depression and anxiety. G and H, antipsychotic. Over the past 2 decades, there have been an obvious increase in these trends, particularly in primary school children and university students. Current data indicates that approximately 25% of young adults in Quebec use psychotropic medication. It is evident that children encounter numerous challenges, and it's the responsibility of adults to provide an appropriate support. Unhappily, clinicians are generally concentrated on presenting symptoms without considering factors such as family dynamics, the quality of educational and community support, environmental and socioeconomic condition, or climate-related stressor. During the summer, we published two large reviews on ADHD. The theory suggests that ADHD is caused by a neurodevelopmental disorder with a genetic basis. However, our literature review has identified 52 psychosocial or medical factors that may contribute to the manifestation or the severity of symptoms. For instance, various authors have identified dysfunction in the emotional, environmental, and nutritional domains, disturbance in microbiota and dysbiosis leading to the prediabetes, osteomuscular disorder of the jaw, a range of sleep disturbance, as well as an excessive use of video games or virtual social networks. The first concern at present is how to aid these children, especially while some children may require psychiatric support, their numbers are likely limited. It appears that theoretical frameworks may have overlooked aspects of the typical and universal child development. At a baby, possess all their neurons except for stem cells identified within selected region of the brain like hippocampal structures. Brain maturation is prolonged process extending over 44 years old, while recent studies indicate that the peak of cognitive skills occurs between 55 and 60 years old. Moreover, maintaining a healthy lifestyle practice, foster positive emotional condition, and engaging in medication have been shown to augment the volume of the prefrontal cortex. The maturation of the maturation process is closely linked to increase the gray matter within the prefrontal cortex. Humans exhibit this advanced capacity for cerebral development. This phenomenon presents two advantages. First, it facilitates adaptation and interaction with the environment, offering considerable opportunities to lead to learning and exploring imagination, culture, art, and engineering. Second, it provides significant potential for people who have experienced that challenge during the childhood. No adults, by a positive altering their familiar or social life, some of them may develop their abilities and reach a well-being. Four factors contribute to the brain maturation, particularly in the prefrontal lobes. These include both genetic and epigenetic influence. However, life experience, the experience of the risk or protective factors, and determinant of mental health play a especially major role. It is remarkable that young children can form 300 million synapses per day, provided they feel safe. The quantity of the synapses directly impact the volume of the prefrontal cortex and the capacity to exercise discernment, especially under stressful circumstances. It's essential to recognize that learning inherently results from a sequence of adaptive processes. The environment undergoes continual change, required adaptive response in biological systems and behaviors among humans, plants, insects, and other animals. These experiences are retained in memory to support more effective adaptation for the next situation. When a child or an adult encounter an opportunity, emotion guides subsequent action of thought. Emotional constitute a neurological response to endurance for 90 to 120 seconds. If this physiological state persists beyond this duration, it indicates that the mind is generating specific feeling, reflecting the affective or cognitive process. Every emotion initiates a stress response, mobilizing the body or the mind to respond to the change imposed by the circumstance. The stress loop triggered in less than a tenth of a second. It's essential to acknowledge that this change may be tangible as well as imagined or virtual. Each opportunity elevates the levels of stress hormones in the body due to a slow gradual rate of degradation. A previously stated, the prefrontal cortex does not accomplish the full maturity until late adulthood. Emotional regulation and impulse control skills do not fully develop until young people reach their mid-20s. Impulsivity may contribute to athletics activities such as hockey, tennis, soccer, or Formula One racing. Nevertheless, it can present significant challenge within house or classroom. It's not a potential mental disorder, but a learning of social rules. Children must acquire the ability to evaluate the circumstance and to adapt their behavior to a various context. Adults must help children with compassionate intervention and clear boundaries. Without emotional security, children are unlikely to respond correctly to the environmental demands. So, pleasant or unpleasant emotion can increase the concentration of stress hormones in the body. 15 years ago, Chevret showed that heart rate and breath accelerate because of the increased stress level. At a moment, it's too hard to manage the stress level. Amygdala controls behavior and the child falls into an emotional seizure. He hits, he screams, he flees, he collapses, and the stress level decreases slowly. The method for reducing stress as well as preventing undesirable behavior include, like Adele Diamond said, there's healthy lifestyle habits, especially a good quality of sleep and breath, the presence of a sweet adult, slow music, and time, sometimes a lot of time. Without security, from a compassionate adult, achieving calm may require several hours and sometimes 1, 2, 3 days, and in some cases, more times. During this period, synaptogenesis is blocked, the maturation of the brain is on pause. Earlier, I referenced two significant phenomena. The volume of the prefrontal cortex expands progressively each year due to a continuous formation of new synapses. A young child may form up to 300 million new synapses daily if he feels safe. 5 years ago, Max and colleagues measure the brain volume in young adults. They conduct a comparative study involving two cohorts of orphans from Britain and from Romania who were held in orphanage during the Ceausescu dictatorships. All the subjects were adopted by parents in Britain and have received a similar education. Almost 20 years after the adoption, the brain volume differs. The fuchsia dots illustrate the brain volume in English orphans. The turquoise dots indicate the brain volume in Romania children adopted by the English family. The volume is approximately 10 to 15% lower. The diagram B indicates that the effect on the brain volume is correlated with the duration of incarceration in Romania orphanage. Like Isabel said, stress is not fundamentally problematic. Rather, it's the context that may contribute to health complication and disorder. Positive stress facilitates adaptation and fosters the acquisition of new strategy. During periods of adversity, it's essential for children to receive support from caring, consistent, and honest adults who provide a reassurance and encourage a smoothly stress regulation. Conversely, exposure to chronic stress without supportive adults can impair neurological development and delay the growth of emotional, cognitive, and social abilities. Due to the time constraint, it's not possible to detail all potential consequences of disruption occur during the pregnancy and early childhood. A lot of studies suggest that various adult health concerns can be linked to the unfavorable or inadequate living conditions during early childhood development. The prevalence and severity of chronic disease are influenced by the intensity and duration of adverse childhood experience. So, education should undergo transformation to discontinuing harmful disciplinary practice to mitigate the risk associated with adverse childhood experience. Enhancing educational approach within families, communities, and schools, addressing protective factor and its determinant to advance the socio-economic condition and environment affecting children. 27 years ago, Seligman initiated a novel orientation for his corporation to better understand what helps people be happy. The initial wave of positive psychology, however, presents several interpretive challenges, particularly in Francophone region. To address this issue, we introduce an alternative conceptual framework for understanding positive mental health. Every child needs an adult who take care of him. Without emotional security, the child may be more vulnerable to experiencing trauma from various situations. Furthermore, inappropriate use of authority by others can exacerbate the toxic stress. As a result, resilience and self-esteem may remain underdeveloped. Nevertheless, an attentive adult can provide reassurance of the child and contribute positively to a feeling of well-being. Emotional security supports healthy brain development, enabling children to enhance their capacity for emotional and stress regulation, even in the presence of adversity. Promoting positive mental health fosters the development of personal skills and resilience. Therefore, 4 educational pillars are identified as promoting positive mental health. Peaceful education breeds strong self-esteem. A protective adult induces a flexible adaptability. A safe social environment facilitates the development of emotional, cognitive, and social skills. Acting to reduce the climate footprints allows for an essential hope to reduce the eco-anxiety. When we talk about integrative health, it's to prevent or to reverse the process of chronic disease as much as possible. If we really want to help children, we must respect the rhythm of global development, and we need to consider healthy environment and climatic transformation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Joel. I really liked that you said that to protect children, we need also to protect adults, like environment and climate conditions. So thank you so much for bringing this very important knowledge into the educational field, at least for me. Thank you. Now we will welcome Dr. Sylvia Dubovoy, PhD founder and director of the Montessori Institute in San Diego. You have chosen such an inspiring title, The Environment as Blueprint, How First Relationships Shape the Brain for Oral and Planetary Health.
First of all, I would like to just thank everyone for inviting me, and especially Dr. Adele Diamond that pushed me to just also come with you in such a short notice. I feel very grateful and to participate with all this group of scientists and professors. I'm a practitioner. I'm a practitioner, and I have been working with Montessori education since my child started in 1965, and we started the first Montessori school in Mexico City. So I come from a practice point of view. So I would like to just share with you something that I feel is very important. So I think that in my life, I have seen that the first 3 years of life are wiring the brain. And this is something that for me has been fascinating, because today neuroscience confirms what Maria Montessori observed over a century ago. And I think that the experiences in the first 3 years of literally wire the architecture of the brain. So I would like to just tell you a story. It was just that I didn't want to continue working in Montessori because I could see that people were making interpretations about some of the way that she has been working. And I have experienced Montessori education for 60 years. And in 1990, I saw a newspaper from Ronald Kotulak. He was a journal, like a psychological journal. He was observing in different newspapers. And I was reading the paper, and in the paper says, it seems like the mind absorbs like a sponge, which I don't like that. I don't like that they said like that. But it absorbed, and that there were windows of opportunity. I was already trying to change my career, and I decided, no, this is the moment. This is the moment, and for me, this is just a powerful moment. I think that the opportunity to be talking with all of you is like the cherry of the cake in the last my life, and because it is true, it's absolutely true, but it depends on many, many factors. So one thing that I found was, yes, about the work was that the mouth, a gateway to early experiences, that Montessori wrote that the immense influence that education can have through children has the environment. And you have been talking about that, the environment for this instrument, because the child is absorbing the environment and takes everything from it and incarnates it in himself. So it is the mouth which explores, tastes, speaks, cries, smiles, of the first and most powerful pathways through which the absorption happens. We often think of oral healthy only in terms of preventing cavities, infections, or disease, but it's in the first year that the mouth is also a gateway for bonding, for emotional regulation, for sensory integration, and for joy. And I think that these first 1,000 days are shaping the brain architecture of the child. And I want people that, I think that people have been now understanding that, and to see that it's happening, that more people are now aware that it's in those first 3 years of life that the capacity for trust, for a secure attachment, for empathy, for emotional regulation, all those aspects that Dr. Del Diamond was talking about, it's really about resilience and self-recovery. All that starts the first 1,000 years of life and even before. All these lifelong hygiene habits also start in that moment. Independence, order, feeding, and self-care. All these are roots not only of health, but of a lifelong well-being. So the first task of the adult is observation. Observation is the first task, but I don't see that people want observing. The adult watches with care, with attention, with interest, waiting for the right moment to involve the child in small ways during hygiene care. These invitations will support cooperation, autonomy, and body awareness long before oral health becomes a routine. And I would like to just to read you, just to give you an example of that, because when I talk about observation, I don't think that people really understand what is the aspect. And even in many Montessori schools, observation, we study observation in depth. You really have to go beyond all what you can see, all your preconceived ideas about what is a child, all your expectations, or your wishes. So to give you an example, a child just comes to the environment. He's just coming, right? And he's maybe behaving in ways that we think he's an hyperactive child. And then we diagnose, oh, he's an hyperactive. And during the group time, he's fidgeting, he's shifting his weight, he's tapping his feet, staring at the window, moving away from the rock. So what is the person going to see when they see that, when they observe that? There is immediately a comment from the teacher, he cannot sit, he has ADHD, he's also, and we label children. And that's not what we want. We want to see, observe more. Instead of that, we have to observe carefully. What is the child telling you? Is he seeking movement? Is he seeking vestibular input? Do you see the child with eyes scanning the environment? So is his visual like seeking for something? Do you see the child like he's tapping maybe and she's attempting to self-regulate? The child has overstimulated, there's a lot of overstimulation because he has many things around. Do you think that shoulders of the child are very tense, needs for grounding? So what is the guy going to do when he sees and observes in depth what the child is doing? She recognizes that child, and instead of pushing that child, she will invite that child to go to the garden, to pick up maybe some leaves, to walk around, to feel, to start dressing. And as you all mentioned, breathe and lower the stress. That child that is like that has so much stress. So something that it was also a type of movement that maybe was misinterpreted, sometimes will make that person label that child. So observation tells us when the child is ready for the new experiences. Montessori said the child builds himself by means of his environment. But the adult's first task is observation. And I think we need more classes on observation for everyone because we come with many ideas about what is a child. Observation guides us in creating routines that will meet the biological rhythms and emotional needs, and it will reduce stress and strengthening attachment, trust, and resilience. By observing carefully, we are going to learn more things. When they are ready for new experiences, when they need support for comfort, when they seek for independence, when they are overstimulated or content, when to set routines in accordance with their natural needs, not with a special time in which this is the time for eating, this is the time for going to exercise, this is the time. No, this alignment between adult observation and the child's natural rhythm is what supports for me oral health as well. And ultimately the capacity to care for others and the planet. It means I observe you, I observe what you need, and I respond to your needs with intelligence, with work, with interest, guiding you and what do you need? Not what I want to give, but what do you need? So the cues tell us when the child is experiencing pleasure. I can just invite you to remember the expression of relaxed expression during feeding for maybe a newborn or a baby that is with a mother. What about a toddler's delight in sipping from a cup or putting a spoon in the mouth? A baby's smile when the gums are gently wiped, because we wipe the gums also. We respond not only to prevent harm, but to enhance sensory integration, emotional regulation, connection with others, self-trust and empathy. A child that is respected, a child that is, you open your mind, that you're listening, you are there with your presence, that child starts trusting the world. So Montessori preparation of the environment and early prevention in public health and attention to the joy of oral exploration, I feel like all of those things that you are talking now, they are all aligned. They are honor survival, but they are also honoring delight and a sense of interconnectedness. When we involve children in small ways in the activity during hygiene care, they also feel independent. They feel respected. They feel as like someone recognizes me. And the routines must mirror the Montessori principle. Help me to do it by myself. Every child that needs guidance is begging, but let me do it, let me try it. But it is the adult that, because of the pressure and the stress that they have, that transmit that stress to the child. And then we all suffer. So I think that our health is not just functional. It is a story of development, of pleasure, and of connection. I will invite you to see every smile, cry, or sob, because it has information, pleasure, and a sense of connection to others. When caregivers observe these behaviors carefully, on attention, they discover that the child is ready to learn new routines or not. What is the child aware? How do we help them for wiping gums? How, for example, how to explore a toothbrush? How to sip water? Why do they have to keep on with the bottle all the time? And then children can start aligning these routines with the adult and the caregivers, all we align with the child's natural curiosity, capacity for joy, and awareness of the living world. I think the children are so stressed, even in Montessori environments, if you want to keep things in a certain way. I would like to talk much more about observation, but I will just give you 5 key routines to support oral and planetary health, because I wanted to participate in this talk, and I thought, okay, how I can just put my knowledge with some routines. So first, the first routine that I will try to work with prenatal health, preparing the adult. I think there is a preparation of the adult. Observation begins with the pregnant mother. This pregnant mother, she has to be aware of herself. She has to have self-observation and notice the stress that she has, what type of nutrition she's eating, with so much awareness and so much responsibility. This mom needs information. She needs exactly to be prepared. And also, everything that she's doing to that baby when she's pregnant is influencing the baby's nervous system. There are many studies about that. So even good oral care in pregnancy reduces inflammation, preterm births, and long-term disease risk. Montessori described this as the preparation of the adult. So starting from the beginning of life, even before those 1,000 days, the mother is she prepares herself, is developing awareness, regulation, and care. That is what the mother needs to live and model to the child. You know, healthy attitudes that the child will observe and imitate. He will do that if he sees that mother. But it is the mother, the first one, that we have to do self-observation. Another routine would be from birth to 1 year. That's the first relationship and the golden liquid. When I have been seeing that now, and the trauma that has at birth, have you seen the hospitals? Have you seen the way it works? Have you seen that baby that is just born? He has already received so much information inside the mother's womb. And he goes outside and a totally different environment with lights, with this. We want him to breathe. How is he going to breathe in that environment? So what kind of way of receiving that child is in many places? I know that in many places what they are doing is they are letting the baby stay with the mother's womb for 2 or 3 hours, so the baby can really see can connect with the mother, with the smell. All the senses start awakening. Breastfeeding is not only nourishment, it's also an emotional oral immune therapy. The colostrum that the mother will give at the beginning of life delivers antibodies and growth factors, supporting both oral microbiome development and establishing feeding patterns of comfort and trust. You know, this is part of something. Just the beginning of life is the first trauma. So starting with that, we have to help, and the only way is observing. Observe the babe. Observe the babe when he has all these manipulations from the nurses, when they are showing about reflexes, when they are manipulating him, this baby needs to be received in a good care, in a good way. So he has, I am glad that I'm coming to this world. The environment has to receive that baby with love, with respect, and with responsibility. And for that, we need more information. We need more people trained in observation. One thing that connected with oral health, well, gently wiping the gums. Gently wiping the gums of the child before he has the teeth during the first 6 months becomes a moment of affection, of eye contact, of sensory pleasure. This will be the foundation of a lifelong hygiene without fear. It's not merely hygiene for its own sake. We do not to push the child. We use every contact that we have with the child for relationship. The adult is the only one that can see that child and has. So holding, handling, and feeding, yes, that is the beginning of this symbiotic period. Those 40 days, governments ask the mom to come back 2 weeks after birth. You cannot do that with a mom. That mom has a responsibility with that child. She needs to be with that child and really fulfill that symbiotic period. The routine 3, well, the emergence of teeth. What is the child going to do? Learning by imitation. When teeth appear, the children have the sensitive periods. They need order, they need language, they need movement. They also need to repeat sensorially what the parents are doing. They imitate the adults. This, for me, is the optimal moment for exploring a toothbrush. You can give him a choice. Would you like a blue one? Would you like a pink one? You start even in the beginning of life. The other aspect that is so important is tasting water. There are children that have not been able to have a little glass at 6 months with water. What is water? And then being careful with that. Learning simply hygiene steps start from the beginning. Not when the child is 5 years, not when the child is 6 years, they have to learn how to brush the teeth. No, you start at 6 months. You start with weaning. You start with weaning and selecting the food that the child is going to have. So observation, again, is revealing to you readiness. You have to observe the readiness. And we help the students and the parents and so to show, is the child ready to sit? Is he giving you messages that he can start eating food, that he's interested in the environment? That's observation. And we know that repetition of the same thing by imitations, he will imitate everything that is around him. Repetition will build neural pathways for coordination, for joy, and for early empathy. So repetition, observation, and attention to pleasure create neural pathways for skill and judgment and awareness of how caring for oneself supports caring for others, which is a very important aspect of life. What about routine 4? Routine 4, toddlerhood, from 16 months to 3 years. That's when we start setting with order the habits, but through freedom and joy. It should be wonderful to help them and observe in which moment we can just show them how to do it. Toddlers thrive on rhythm and predictability. They want to have order. That's the executive functions. You have to plan, you have to organize, you have to know beforehand. So that experience is a good experience. The mother, the adult, the caregiver remains calm and unhurried. The environment is orderly, it's inaccessible. We have everything that we need. Like for making a cake, you have all the elements. So the child is successful with the brush, with the teeth, with the soap, with everything. So toothbrushing can naturally become part of the daily routine after meals and before rest. It can be a joyful experience. And we are preventing all the sickness and disease that we see. Predictable routines also lower cortisol, and support self-regulation. Absolutely, I'm stressed, I cannot function. What about routine 5? Why? Water and diet, connecting oral health to planetary and sensory joy. What about water? What about drinking water first? Ideally, we will fluoridate it. But water is not just something that is like ambiguous or like we all know. No, by really working with water, teaches independence. We teach children from the beginning of life how to serve themselves, how to use a pitcher, how to have a glass. They are not asking you to give them water. They have a pitcher with water whenever they are thirsty. You have that on one side. You support that with the child independence because they are free to work in the environment. But also the water supports oral health and also models environmental responsibility because you show them how careful you have to walk when you have water, who's having more, or how to take care when it goes to the floor. There is an awareness about closing and don't closing the faucet. So we are really taking care of the water. So there are many habits that we can teach during those 1,000 years that get forever for all their life. Another part that I think is very important is avoiding sugary drinks because that preserves taste sensitivity. I know exactly how it has changed, but also it reduces waste, which is also something that is economical better because it's linking pleasure with planetary health. Be careful about that. So instead of so many sugary drinkings, just drink water. That child will absorb that and will make it part of his life for the rest of his life. Now, observation, again, ensures we meet children's biological needs and their natural desire to pleasure, to curiosity, and connection. I can give you so many stories about water, but I just wanted, I know that I was coming with you and I said, there are many research that are talking about what I have just said. There's a theory about attachment and brain development. Predictable, attuned care wires neural circuits for self-regulation, for pleasure, and for empathy. Yeah, attachment. The way you relate to the child, it starts with observation. What about the polyvagal theory? Calm social engagement, when they are in a place in which there's a peaceful environment, in which nobody's stressing them because they can work at their own pace, at their own rhythm, because nobody's forcing them to do what is certain hours. It has to be very open. Calm social engagement support digestion, immunity, the enjoyment of feeding, also for relational awareness. What about relational neurobiology? Insight, which is really the ability to see and shape one's own internal world, develops caregivers when caregivers are attuned with what they are doing. When you're supporting awareness of biological signals, pleasure, and connection to others. Public health is doing a great work because now all this, even what you're doing now, oral care, breastfeeding, and sugar reduction prevents non-contagious diseases while supporting lifelong habits of caring for self and others. This is wonderful what everyone is doing. But also adverse childhood experience, routines and observation buffer stress and build empathy, fostering lifelong enjoyment of eating, speaking, social interaction, and planetary stewardship. I think that we have known about this, and I have worked with this for many years, and it works. So I want to tell you that oral health is not only survival. It's just a pathway to pleasure, because there are many other things that you do with your mouth. It's sensorial organ. It's many things that you do, but it's not just the mouth. It's the tongue and the mandibles and all your body, all the body, and breathing and not stressing. All that empathy, self-regulation is environmental responsibility and peace. I think that when caregivers and educators and health professionals and all what you're doing right now can observe children in many places and respond to their cues without preconceived ideas about what is a child, without expectations, without preferences, just be open to discover a human being with a personality of its own, then when we're really doing that, we are creating ecosystems of care that really are nurturing resilience and stewardship for both for yourself and for the planet. I think that when a child learns to care for their mouth, they learn to savor life. They connect with others. They learn to care for the world. It has been for me a wonderful experience than living with children and see that when you allow them to grow in a very normal way, the way they are, and respect what each one has, it's time now. After 100 years, Maria Montessori used to say, don't look at me, observe the child. Observe the child, but to be able to learn, you have to take out from your eyes that feeling that I need to control the child, or I need to make the child, engage the child with toys. No, what are the needs of the child, and respond to them with a prepared environment, and of course, with a prepared adult that has taken as the first class in their life how to observe a human being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. You really got our attention to the mouth of the child in such a depth. So thank you very much for that. And now we are going to the next speaker. And that is Karen Sprout from a National Institute of Medicine and Health and the University of Paris, France. This will be a session that is pre-recorded, and the title of it is Sleep Equity, the Overlooked Frontier in Child Health.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this event. I am Professor Karen Sprout and work at the French National Institute of Health in CERN in Paris. I regret that I can't be present in person, but I'm delighted to share my perspective with you. Long before modern science, we have August Kerner, who recognized that sleep reflects cellular homeostasis. He saw it as an barometer, and that difficulty sleeping may signal early systemic dysregulation, or as he wrote it, a state of disease somewhere in the complicated apparatus. Today we know that Kerner's intuition was right. Sleep does reflect our biological balance, and its disruption mirrors wider inequities in health and environment. For instance, based on aggregated data from over 1.1 million individuals, 1 in 4 people gets less sleep than recommended for their age. But actually, for children, it is 1 in 3, while only 5.8% sleep outside the acceptable sleep duration range. Another study showed that lower income to needs ratios are linked to more reported sleep-wake problems in children. Neighborhood disadvantage, such as fewer greener spaces, predicts poor sleep quality and shorter sleep duration across development. My own research showed that family resources such as caregivers' time to self, money, and basic needs influence consistency of timing and duration of sleep, as well as quality of children's sleep. So in the following, I will outline the science of sleep, its relevance for health, the consequences of its disruption, and how these patterns reveal broader questions of sleep equity. So first, a brief overview of the anatomy of sleep, highlighting two key pathways, that is, the arousal pathway and the sleep pathway. So two wake signal branches exist. Branch number one, the neurons in the upper pons produce acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, activating the thalamus, which channels signals to the cerebral cortex, the seat of arousal and consciousness. Second branch will actually make that also the brain awakes. So here, in the second branch, the peptides, other neurotransmitters, reinforce that arousal system, so priming the cortex to receive signals from the thalamus. And as a result, these two branches produce our wakefulness, the arousal pathway. During the day, the brain tires, and this is under homeostatic control and circadian control. So as the energy carrier ATP breaks down, the adenosine builds up and triggers neuron activity in the VLPO. Under the circadian control, we know that the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the brain's master clock, containing neurons that fire in a 24-hour cycle to influence that VLPO. It is controlled by signals from the retina during the day and by melatonin from the pineal gland at night. So the brain sleeps. This means that the VLPO neurons are activated. This means that they release GABA and galanin, and so they will inhibit that ascending arousal pathway system, or that arousal branches that we just discussed. So this switch is influenced actually by environmental cues that we also call zeitgebers. And they can be both intrinsic as well as extrinsic. So intrinsic could be internal biological signals, such as body temperature, cortisol, or even that sleep propensity, but as well as social interactions, our lifestyles, and activity. Another one that is very much known is the sleep hormone. So the interlinked biorhythms, they synchronize really that flip-flop system where melatonin plays a crucial role in aligning our circadian rhythm. At the same time, as I just mentioned, neurochemical balances regulate. They regulate our sleep pressure, so the homeostatic sleep pressure. And this not to make that switch between wake and sleep or sleep and wake, but also to help orchestrate the transitions between different sleep stages, such as the non-REM sleep and the REM sleep. As a result, over the course of the 24 hours, what we have is that the sleep pressure gradually builds up, making the brain and the body increasingly tired. Eventually, this pressure reaches a tipping point, and that is where the circadian signals, such as, for example, decreasing daylight, they combine with the sleep pressure will flip the brain into that sleep state. So why does sleep matter? Well, sleep is actually measured based on our brain waves, on the eye movements, muscle tone, and cardiorespiratory function. And so based on these biosignals, we can create or we can recognize the structure in our sleep, the architecture, sleep architecture, where we can recognize stage N1, stage N2, stage N3, or how the sleep, the non-REM sleep, the non-rapid eye movement sleep, gradually becomes more deeper. And so what is the characteristic of this non-REM sleep? Well, we see that the eye movements are slow, the muscle tonus is reduced, and the cardiorespiratory functions are slow and regular. But during sleep, we are also in a more paradoxical state or behavior, where we see that the eyes are random and fast, or eye movements are random and fast, that the muscle tone is absent, and a fast and irregular cardiorespiratory function. And that is what's called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. So based on these features, we have also learned that sleep state is not static, that it changes across the life's course, reflecting developmental, physiological, and behavioral shift from infancy to adulthood. As you can see on this scheme, as a newborn, you're in your sleep, you spend around 50% of your time in REM and non-REM sleep. So the proportion of your sleep is 50-50 REM and non-REM sleep. And as you can see, this changes over the course of your life. Now, why does it really matter, that sleep? And why is it so important, particularly in childhood? Well, developmental neuroscience shows us that there are sensitive periods. This means times where certain brain functions reach peak maturation. Interestingly, these periods coincide with the times we spend much of our day asleep. In other words, sleep is an essential pillar of health, just like nutrition and physical activity. One may even say, I sleep, therefore I am. Sleep supports brain development, emotional regulation, memory consolidation, and while also regulating hormones in the immune system, such as the growth hormone and cortisol. Circadian rhythm entrainment begins in infancy. Yet, despite all we know, we still do not know fully or still do not fully understand what constitutes normal or optimal sleep for healthy development. A question that lies at the heart of my research here at INSEAD. An increasing body of research is showing the serious health consequences of that disrupted sleep. So from cognitive and emotional difficulties to metabolic as well as immune dysregulation. So in a nutshell, in children and adolescents, disrupted sleep affects 15 to 44%, with diagnosed insomnia in about 11%. Asymptomatic sleep disturbances reported in up to 40% of the cases. Obstructive sleep apnea affects up to 6% of the children, with higher rates of sleep disturbances and complaints among those with developmental disabilities and rare disorders. In adulthood, particularly young adults, are vulnerable, with around 14.8% to 26.4% experiencing nightly insomnia, while obstructive sleep apnea affects 18%. Now, across all ages, women are more likely than men to experience sleep disturbances. Now, why it is so important is that the widespread sleep disturbances come with a significant economic burden, estimated at 178.5 to 184 billion euros. So some time ago, I conducted an umbrella meta-review showing that both sleep duration and sleep disorders, and particularly sleep-related breathing disorders, are consistently associated with adverse health outcomes. For example, children that snore all the way to those that have obstructive sleep apnea syndrome, that is, those children that have experienced brief breathing stops during sleep, they show moderate to severe impairments in memory, attention, language skills, and IQ. In my own work, I found that sleep variability, or the irregularity of several of the sleep features, it is linked to an increased risk of cardiometabolic syndrome. This is putting children at risk for obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Both literature and my studies also show that sleep fragmentation, timing of sleep, are associated with socio-emotional behavioral problems. While napping is increasingly investigated, it does not fully substitute for nighttime sleep due to its circadian timing. Sleepiness, though less studied, has been linked to poor school performance, and experimental studies further support these findings where sleep restriction or sleep deprivation leads to cognitive deficits, such as decreased vigilance or problems with working memory, learning, abstract thinking, and delayed memory recall. We also see that sleep extension improves vigilance, memory, and cognitive flexibility. Taken together, despite these heterogeneity amongst the studies, it was very clear that poor sleep already has a moderate adverse effects across multiple developmental domains. And with better study designs, I am very much confident that the true effect size is even larger. Bringing me to that overlooked barrier. So, during a recent presentation, I was reminded of the Occam's razor, and I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's a principle I first encountered in my philosophy classes, also known as the principle of parsimony. It emphasizes simplicity in problem solving. From my perspective, this translates into creating health as the simplest approach to managing disease. In that spirit, my talk strongly advocates for a collective mobilization to prioritize sleep as a foundational pillar of health. To better understand this overlooked frontier, I draw on Bronfen Brenner's ecological system theory, visualized as concentric circles showing how an individual development is shaped by interconnected environmental systems. One key layer is the chronosystem. It captures environmental events, life transitions, social historical circumstances. Environmental events include natural disasters such as hurricanes or earthquakes. Transitions encompass major life changes such as divorce or the death of a family member. So social historical circumstances refer to significant social or historical events that occur during a person's life and influences development. The best examples I can give here are COVID-19 or the pandemic reshaping children's sleep with later bedtimes, irregular routines, and increased sleep disturbances. A review showed that the last 100 years, sleep duration in childhood decreased with about 73 minutes per year. At the microsystem level, cultural, societal contexts shape children's sleep. Factors include whether a country is developing or industrialized, socioeconomic status, poverty, ethnicity, and the broader social norms and economic systems. As noted earlier, a lower income to needs ratio is linked to more reported sleep-wake problems in children. Other influences include neighborhood economic deprivation, minority status, community violence, discrimination. All are associated with poor sleep quality. Interestingly, children in Europe, North America, and Australasia tend to have earlier bedtimes, earlier wake times, and longer nocturnal sleep than children in Asia and the Middle East. However, I need to make a comment here because there are notable differences even within regions. At the exosystem level, influences on the child are indirect. They are usually affecting the child through other people in their life. One example is what Robert Meadows called the negotiated night, a term I really like, because this refers to what goes to elements about negotiation. So who goes to bed when, in terms of the shift workers, or who cares for a child in terms of the new composite families, whether to co-sleep or to sleep separately, when sleeping arrangements become a site of negotiation, which reflects power dynamics, gender roles, bodily rhythms, and social expectations. At the mesosystem level, we focus on the interconnections, those interconnections between the different environments surrounding the child. For example, ethnicity can moderate the impact of economic adversity on children's sleep, while stress also acts as a moderator. Other studies have shown that sleep quality is linked to heart rate variability or family conflict and predict later insomnia. In this way, the outer layers of the ecological system interact with the inner layers, bridging broader societal influences and with the individual outcomes on the short and on the long term. So really the impact from the outer to the inner circles, and this on short and long term events. At the microsystem level, influences directly affect the child. And these include marital hostility or hostile parenting, school start times, extracurricular activities, or the sleep setting itself, and many others. So these have immediate settings with interactions and a direct impact on the child's sleep and overall development. And at the core of this system theory, we can put the child's sleep, their individual need for sleep, and as such, I believe that 21st century health identity lacks sleep. And this brings me to my conclusion. And I would like to invite you to join the sleep initiative, and so to bring that sleep-wake perspective at the primary care level. That is, we screen and question how much sleep there was over the 24 hours, or how difficult it is to fall asleep, to stay asleep, or to wake up. Other questions could be when does sleep or the wakefulness occur during that 24-hour period. Next, is there consistency in sleep and wake features? For example, regular bedtimes. So is the focus, attention, or the performance maintained during the waking hours? Another element in that sleep-wake mnemonic that I propose is asking about what the subjective perception of the individual sleep or wakefulness is, how the person perceives their sleep and their wake state. We should never overlook age-related changes. Also important is who is affected, who is diagnosing, and what interventions have been attempted. And lastly, in this screener would be what are the conditions and settings for sleep? Why do I believe that this sleep-wake mnemonic and screening tool can actually help is because up till today, there's too often a sleep and sleep problem remains often undiagnosed and not routinely assessed. Hope I can convince you of the importance of sleep equity, and I would like to thank you for your attention.
So now we thank you, Karen. You convinced me, at least. It was very interesting to listen to all these insights on the often overlooked aspects of holistic health for the sleep. So thank you for that. We will now travel to the USA and to listen to Dr. Umakant Katwa from Harvard Medical School in Boston, USA. As I understand, you will bring our attention to functional early detection. And your title is From Reactive Treatment to Functional Early Detection, positioning sleep and oral function as strategic levers for upstream NCD prevention and system level reform. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this excellent symposium. So I'm the sleep physician working at Boston, and I will be talking on the how can we change the paradigm from reactive treatment and continuative treatment from a course of an early detection. So when you talk about sleep and oral health, the disease I'm going to be talking about is obstructive sleep apnea. So I will take that and try to build a case why this is critical and how we are missing the milestones at multiple levels of a disease which is very prevalent and has a significant impact on the overall health, not only in the childhood, but also of our elderly population. So, so let me start with a case to make my point, and then we'll walk you through some of the things I'm talking about. So there was a 20-year-old male who came to see me with a long-standing history of snoring. He had history of mouth breathing for a long time, multiple allergies, anxiety, depression, and fluoxetine. He was in the college and he was really struggling through insomnia, sleep disturbances, just not feeling great, brain fog. He even struggled in the high school. He somehow pulled through it, but in the college, he was really struggling. His grades were not great, attention issues, those things happening. If you look at his history, when he was 7 years old, he was diagnosed with severe sleep apnea. He had big adenoids and tonsils, had a surgery. His snoring got better at that time, but he continued to mouth breathe. Then at 10 years of age, he had some allergies because his mouth breathing was persisting. They saw him again. He had regrown adenoids, had another surgery. So there was some partial response to this, but he continued to snore on and off. So his history, he was born at term. He was not breastfed. He had feeding difficulty in the beginning. He preferred soft food when he was a kid. He had a history of chronic mouth breathing, nasal congestion, seasonal allergies. So when you look at him, he was not obese. His craniofacial profile, he had grown beard, but you really look through it. He had a small chin, retrognatic. He had a slightly convex face with the vertical placed mandible counterclockwise, with a high arch palate and a narrow maxilla. He had a septal deviation, very nasal blockage with a turbinate hypertrophy, very crowded airways, tonsils were obviously gone, no tongue tie. So obviously after he came, I referred him to a sleep study. And the sleep study, if you see this blue line, indicates he was awake. He could barely sleep. And he was having these micro sleeps in between here. He was having immediate, each line indicates an apnea and these drops in saturation. So whenever he slept, he was obstructing, so he could not sleep because he needs to survive to breathe. And the moment he was falling asleep, he was having sleep apnea. Finally, towards the end of the night, his sleep drive was so high, he just slept. And then even though his sleep was very fragmented, he had a multiple apneas. And this is each line indicates the degree of sleep fragmentation. So he had a very significant sleep fragmentation. So he had a very poor sleep quality. He had an apnea index, which is the marker of the severity of the disease, which was 74. Normally should be less than 1 or less than 5 in adults for that matter. Loud snoring. He had mild desaturations, very severe sleep fragmented. His sleep was very, very fragmented. So basically at this point, what are the options for him? You treat him, give him CPAP. The question is, this young man, he's a 20-year-old without any major health issues, non-obese. Why did he end up on a path of a severe sleep apnea affecting his life up until now? And then we are recommending a treatment, which we typically recommend in much older population. So what is the future? Like, how long he's going to use CPAP? Is it for the rest of his life? So let's go back and try to understand what is sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is, or a sleep disorder breathing is a very highly heterogeneous systemic chronic inflammatory disorder of dysfunctional breathing during sleep. There are recurrent episodes of partial or complete airway obstructions. So if you do, these are the main criteria for children. They have to have snoring, they have to have a labored breathing, they can have daytime sleepiness, tiredness, fatigue, learning difficulties, neurocognitive issues, all those things. And sometimes parents bring you a video recording of the child sleeping. And if you can see this child is breathing through the mouth, you can have this paradoxical breathing where the chest wall is moving in opposite direction to the abdomen. This is a classic obstructive sleep apnea breathing pattern. So parents bring, and it's very diagnostic of a severe sleep apnea. And if you do a sleep study, they have a sleep apnea on the sleep study. So why should we care about sleep apnea in children? And what are the consequences? Right? I think just Karen talked about the importance of sleep and how it develops and what are the mechanism of sleeps and how it can impact the overall health. So basically, there are 4 things happening because of obstructed breathing. You can have an intermittent drop in saturation. You saw in the sleep study. There can be elevated carbon dioxide because you're not able to take a bigger breath. Your sleep can be very fragmented. You saw that on the sleep study. And you're working hard to breathe through the narrow airway. You increase the respiratory effort. So you are in an autonomic drive during sleep. So sleep should be more of a parasympathetic pattern where everything is calmed down, you're breathing comfortably, but you're in a stress mode because of this struggle breathing with an obstructive airway. So because of that, there is more autonomic surges. There is blood pressure dysregulation during the night. there is endothelial dysfunction, there can be dyslipidemia because of the metabolic dysregulations, endocrine issues such as insulin resistance. You can also have a significant impact on the neurocognition because of the fragmented sleep in children, which basically includes excessive daytime sleepiness, attention issues, poor memory, poor concentrations, and some children can also have nocturnal analysis. Right, and you can look at these things. A patient who can have a healthy person, when he can develop sleep apnea and he can throw in obesity, he can go in multiple directions regarding his comorbidities. And these are all the chronic diseases we are talking about. These diseases affects the quality of the life, the healthcare burden, and overall health of a patient. And majority of people are struggling to treat them. And these, to some extent, we can minimize or delay as much as possible, like hypertension, atherosclerosis, diabetes, attention issues in children, anxiety, stress management, anger issues, and drowsy driving. You can name it, and it has an impact because of sleep disturbances. So let's talk about 6 different presentations of sleep apnea at a 6 different age group. So we have a 2-year-old male present with snoring and mouth breathing. We have another 8-year-old male continues with ADHD, snoring, mouth breathing, and he has malocclusion, crowded teeth. We have a 14-year-old boy who struggles in school, high ash palate and small mandible. And we have a 26-year-old female, anxiety, fatigue, depression, tired, and a 42-year-old male with hypertension, OSA, divorced. 69-year-old male with memory issue, dementia, hypertension, and those things. So you can have a sleep apnea with a variety of presentations. And we see these patients in and out. And let's take this and see how they land where they land in things. So if you look at the burden of sleep apnea, this was a study published in Lancet. There are about 1 billion people in the world who have at least mild to severe degree of sleep apnea in 30 to 69-year age group. And if you look at the moderate to severe, meaning those are the people who you need to treat, about 500 million people are affected. And we don't have enough sleep trained people or the pediatricians or the primary care around the world who are aware of the sleep problems. Even in the most developed countries, not uniformly everybody gets screened unless they have a significant symptoms and they go to the doctor. I think that may change with the advent of the technology, wearable technologies, where people start monitoring their health. They can come at an earlier date. And every country in the world have risk of sleep apnea, whether the population is obese or non-obese, because of the other factors can play a role. So if you look at the factors affecting sleep disorder breathing, if you really spread around, that can be right from your genetics and epigenetics, which can frame you the way your airway develops. It can be some prenatal factors, some gestational factors, some postnatal factors, infancy, lifestyle during the childhood and adulthood, and ultimately the environment is also playing a significant role. With the increase in pollution, climate change, and global warming, there has been impact on the quality of the air we breathe and the sleep stability, because warm temperature fragments your sleep and you go into lighter stages of sleep, and people are sleep deprived more in the warmer climate when they're sleeping compared to the populations who have a relatively stable climate. So the genetic factors, classically in sleep apnea, they don't follow the Mendelian inheritance. So if somebody has an OSA, the combination of the genetic factors and the epigenetic modifications for the environmental exposure we talked about, such as intermittent hypoxia, can further influence the disease expression and the endotypes and the severity of sleep apnea. So basically, if somebody has sleep apnea, this hypoxia can modify your epigenetic factors, and some of the symptoms and expression of the disease can be accelerated depending on, like, metabolic syndrome can be accelerated or hypertension can be unmasked. So having that will unmask some of the disease phenotypes. Chronic hypoxia can also lead to epigenetic modifications, particularly we are talking about in the fetus, and histone modifications can also express into various inflammatory stress response, sympathetic activation, metabolic pathway, and ultimately a combination of what you're designed genetically to be and what your epigenetics are modifying the gene itself because of your intermittent hypoxia or stress response during sleep can manifest how you present with sleep apnea. There are various presentations, Some have mild symptoms or minimal symptoms, and some can have a significant symptoms for the same degree of sleep apnea on a sleep study. If we look at the gestation sleep apnea, we're talking about sleep apnea during pregnancy. And this is an important aspect because this ties into what happens later in life. So about 10 to 20% of the pregnant women develop sleep apnea during pregnancy who never had sleep apnea to begin with. The highest vulnerability is during the 3rd trimester. So what does sleep apnea in a mother has effect on the pregnancy? If you look at this sleep study, this is the sleep study where the patient sleeps. This line indicates the patient was before the treatment, and this is your oxygen saturation. You see the patient sleeps, and each line, pink and red line, indicates an apnea. They're nearly continuous apnea, and the brain is waking up continuously. Each line indicates an awakenings. The patient was snoring here. You see the oxygen is, this is 70. I don't know, you can see this. This is 100%. The oxygen was going into the 70s when the patient was sleeping. Imagine this stress response and the intermittent hypoxia, making the hypoxic condition of the fetus even worse from night to night basis for the entire duration of the particularly 3rd trimester. So what happens because of this is the mother is at a higher risk of developing preeclampsia, also risk for developing preterm labor, insulin resistance, and frankly, gestation diabetes in some patients. There's the risk of C-section increases because the fetal activity and the fetal distress can increase because of sleep apnea. And there is also possibility of fetal growth restriction. And when we treat these patients with CPAP, this is where you start treating CPAP. You can see the oxygen with increasing pressure completely normalizes. The patient starts getting into this red is the REM sleep. Initially, they didn't have REM sleep. And the apneas, as you increase the pressure, will go away. So you can literally treat that, provided that you identify and prevent the damage it can cause to the fetus. So, ultimately, what are the maternal sleep apnea? What are the effect of the maternal sleep apnea on the fetus? And if you look at this video here, this is a baby who is doing the sucking, and actually sucking the thumb in utero. This is an ultrasound image. You can see the tongue and the motion of the tongue where the baby is actually sucking. And this is an important mechanism for the baby's tongue to develop, maxilla to develop, and jaw to develop. If the baby does not do the sucking movements, whether with thumb sucking or without the thumb sucking, because the baby is swallowing the amniotic fluid, it can ultimately affect the craniofacial development, swallowing function, and these are the babies who subsequently can present with dysphagia, speech issues, or trouble breathing issues. And that second swallowing mechanism can be affected by maternal sleep apnea because of the intermittent hypoxia and the stress response. It can also affect the fetal gene expression we were talking earlier. Like we saw the second swallowing, it can impair that mechanism. Because the second swallowing is not happening, the jaw development, which is this exercising effect on the jaw, can be affected. It can also affect the fetal breathing when the fetus is trying to breathe and learn how to breathe when the baby comes out. So these babies are at high risk of developing certain apneas. It can impair the muscle and the myofunctional harmony in the baby, and ultimately lead, if it is significant enough, fetal programming and organogenesis in particular system. Not all the babies are prone for that, but certain babies are high risk. So it can have a systemic effect on the baby if the significant sleep apnea in mother is left untreated for a long duration of time. So if you look at the craniofacial development, right, and you can see the baby here has an inferior facial angle, which is on the low side. If you see a baby with the chin already small in utero, you can be rest assured that the baby is going to be born with a smaller chin who is at a high risk of developing sleep apnea subsequently. And there are a lot of factors which determine the jaw and the maxilla and the craniofacial growth. Obviously, your genetics play a big role. The biggest role on a day-to-day basis in the fetus is because of the suck-swallow breathing mechanism. And ultimately, your brain growth and almost the craniofacial growth, about 60% is complete by 6 years of age. So if you don't really recognize them pretty early on, you may miss them and you may be not able to completely recover the symptoms. And these are the stimulus for the craniofacial growth, which we talked about. After birth, the breathing is important. Babies have to breathe through the nose. They're designed to breathe through the nose because it affects the craniofacial growth of the baby. It also stimulates the respiration when you're breathing through the nose. It also helps the diaphragmatic contractions. If you breathe through the mouth, your respiration is shallow. It helps in sinus and maxillary development. And if you look at the patients who are mouth breathers, are chronic nasal breathers, they are not breathing through the nose. They can have maxillary narrowing, narrow nose, narrow upper jaw, and they can have malpositioned canine teeth. So the jaw of the upper jaw becomes smaller, so the teeth may not have enough space for them to grow, so you can have developed the teeth coming all over the place. So that's called malocclusion. Your daytime breathing pattern can also affect the nighttime breathing pattern. So if you're chronically mouth breathing, because your mouth is open both awake and sleep, your jaw development is affected. And because of that, you develop a narrow jaw, abnormal teeth, your airway tends to get blocked and obstructed. And ultimately, from an intermittent mouth breather, you become a chronic mouth breather. From a chronic mouth breather, you can develop this craniofacial dysmorphism. And because of the craniofacial dysmorphism, you develop sleep apnea. So a simple mouth breathing can ultimately, untreated over a period of time, can result in sleep apnea. And now you are not able to breathe through the nose because you have structurally abnormal skeletal development. And these, again, without going into the details, these blue highlighted are the classic pathophysiological factors which affect sleep apnea in adults. If you really look at what's happening early in life, each and every aspect of the pathophysiology of sleep apnea in adults can trace back their origin in some point and form and shape that they were developing the disordered breathing. It was left untreated to the point that they landed up with the significant issues. Not all the patients have all these things, but some patients have a combination of these things, which leads to sleep apnea. So finally, again, the same thing we were talking about. These were the same factors we discussed earlier. So now the model is what we're going to do about it. So the preventive airway health model in the newborn screening tools. So airway focus screening in the well baby visit is an important aspect to early recognize these things, particularly in the pediatrician and the dental offices. One should advocate strongly for the breastfeeding. And if there is a trouble, you should have a lactation support. And the breastfeeding is not necessarily just for nutrition. Nutrition is one aspect of the breastfeeding. Breastfeeding, I think you really heard the previous speakers, that it also has impact on a lot of things. On top of other things, neurocognitive issues and maturation issues and bonding issues and neurodevelopmental issues, it also has an impact on the craniofacial development. If that is lacking, people are breastfeeding by expressing the milk and giving by the bottle, which will have consequently some of the craniofacial dysfunction which we can develop. People are using pacifiers, and the wrong pacifier can actually lead to abnormal craniofacial development. I think with the new technology and AI, we can actually scan. There are pacifiers which actually helps to expand the maxilla, so it can help you. So prescription grade pacifiers can also be recommended. I think there is some work happening in that area rather than just giving a pacifier for a baby, and that should not be used for more than a year. Basically, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends these in the prevention of SIDS because there is a good data. It helps with the respiratory maturation. So weaning, people are trying a lot of soft diet that discourages chewing. So we should encourage them to eat harder like food, address the mouth breathing quickly. You should quickly screen them for growth trajectory and early interventions. And these are some of the red flags, what you can see. If there's a premature infant, definitely high risk of sleep disorder breathing. If the baby has an open mouth posture, not getting better, you should look for that. Low facial muscle tones. If there are tongue ties, we should address that. If there are crowded airways, we should definitely take care of that. That could be a red sign that the airway may be compromised. Low tongue posture, this is a hard palate. If your tongue is sitting on the roof of the palate, the jaw is wider. As the tongue goes down, you can see how the distance between the canines, the molars in the upper jaw can be narrow, and that leads to high arch palate, and these patients are at a high risk of developing sleep apnea. So this is how it looks. And snoring. So these red flags at early age can be picked up and actually try to correct them. Early intervention strategies. So typically in the medical field, the modern medicine, we don't treat until you develop symptoms. We treat once the problem happens. We are not proactive when we see the signs. So we should not wait until they develop symptoms when you know the risk factors are there. Lactation support, speech feeding therapy is important. Nasal hygiene is extremely important, particularly because of the rise in the allergies. If there is a low muscle tone, nasal congestion, you should address them. Tether tissues, we should fix them. In patients who are already having some dysmorphism at an early on, some functional appliances or early interceptive orthodontics can help them to correct some of the orthodontic issues. The goal of the screening should be optimize the airways and the breathing. You can improve by that in early intervention improve craniofacial harmony and myofunctional balance. You can also reduce the risk of sleep disorder breathing, which I'm talking about is improve the airway, improve the muscle tone so the airways are not floppy and the airways are not narrow. This ultimately gives stable sleep because of stable breathing, has a long-term and impact on the neurodevelopmental outcomes in these patients. So an integrative airway team approach is very, very critical for a sleep perspective. So if you look at all these 6 patients, so all the 6 patients can literally present with the same presentations, and it could be same patients. It could be the same patients who was at 2 years old having these symptoms, was misdiagnosed. Then he came at 8 years of old, he developed these symptoms. Then he was 14 years old, he was struggling and he got some other treatment or tonsils were taken out later. And then he continued to struggle with his life because his life got busy, he got anxious, got married, life. He continued to struggle with this and then becomes 40 addressing these issues. And ultimately at 67 or at a time of retirement, this person can already have an early onset dementia because all this time, these symptoms were lack of, they were not addressed properly or they were not seen in continuum because every time the physician changes, every time you're not able to connect the dot. So this is what the same patients the same patient what you saw earlier can present all throughout the life from 2 years age to 67 years of age. So we had missed opportunities during pregnancy. If there was an apnea, we did not address that. We had missed opportunities during infancy, which we did not address. In toddler age group during weaning, we were not concerned about the diet. Mouth breathing was not addressed. There were concerns in teenagers we missed. Concerns in young women who will become pregnant were not addressed. And ultimately in adulthood, by the time they reach there, we feel sometimes the symptoms have already reached to a point of causing significant diseases that we are only treating at that time. There's not much we can do for prevention. So finally, if you look at the Barker's hypothesis in the context of OSA, I think people may be aware of this one. So this one, in the context of OSA, the Barker hypothesis is relevant because intermittent and chronic hypoxia and sleep disturbances because of sleep apnea in mother leads to fetal exposure that impairs craniofacial growth, airway maldevelopment, and metabolic regulation, and later increases the susceptibility of OSA in the patients and is associated with comorbidities in adulthood. If you look at these events here, right, in pregnancy, you can have hypoxia, fragmentation, and intrathoracic swings. It can cause oxidative stress, increase sympathetic nervous system activation, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal glands activation, and increase cardiac preload. So these patients can subtly, initially can have high blood pressure, metabolic dysregulation, systemic inflammation, endothelial dysregulation, and ultimately end result can be hypertension, diabetes, coronary artery disease, cerebral vascular disease, arrhythmias, and heart failure. Sudden death are also very common in untreated sleep apnea, which happen typically early in the morning. So I think we need to have a paradigm shift from a symptom-based screening, diagnosis, and treatment to prevention, early intervention, and phenotype-based precision therapy. Prevention can start right from pregnancy, early infancy. If you see any signs, do an early intervention. Don't wait till the symptoms develop. And if somebody has symptoms already developed coming late into the game, we should be focusing on the precision-based therapy for these patients. So we can plan during pregnancy, fetal monitoring, avoid prematurity to, if possible, C-section, strongly encourage breastfeeding, dietary practices. We can also monitor the airway during infancy in preschool and school. Sometimes the preschool can be a good place for these people to actually, the nurse or the healthcare people can also pick up and bring to the attention of the parents. On the broader scope, we need public awareness about sleep and breathing. Newborn screening programs can be initiated to see for any red flags. Reduction of the pollution is a big term goal, but ultimately that's another impact which can have in the quality of the life and the development of the airway. So finally, the take-home messages are, early risk factors can affect structure, function, relationship, particularly craniofacial dysmorphism. They set up for the airway problems and sleep apnea later in life. By the time the symptoms develop, or the patient come to you with the real symptoms, structural morphology has already established and changes have already happened. Delayed or suboptimum treatment of PEDS OSA or infant sleep apnea, or mistreatment or not treatment at all, can predispose to development of the adult sleep apnea, and discuss and all the things I discuss about the long-term health consequences in adults. So treatment of OSA should include rehabilitation of the airway and correcting the breathing pattern, which may start right during pregnancy, infancy, early childhood, all throughout the life. And life has to be a continuum to pick up at every point where we have a potential to evaluate and diagnose them. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Umakant. This was really informative. I think that I agree with you that this should be out in the public and to giving especially awareness for parents and also, yeah, early childhood. So thank you. Now we are reaching our final speaker of today's webinar before our panel discussion. The last but not the least, welcome to you, Alison Bolos, Executive Director, Center for the Economics of Human Development at the University of Chicago, USA. We are so looking forward to listen to your talk about the economic irreversibility of delayed action, why early prevention is not a moral choice, but an economic law. You carry the legacy of the work of Nobel laureate James Heckman. His research on the long-term economics returns of early childhood investment strongly reinforces our argument that prevention and education are inseparable. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me and see my slides? Yes, excellent. Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm so honored to join your virtual stage here with such an inspiring cohort of distinguished individuals and clear how committed everyone is to the well-being of children. And yes, I'm Alison Bolos, Executive Director of Center for the Economics of Human Development at the University of Chicago, which I co-founded with Nobel Prize-winning economist, Professor James Heckman. I've worked with him for about 20 years now, time flies, and we've been studying early childhood interventions and the impact they have. So our research is fortunate to have a global network of partners and collaborators. So today I'm going to highlight for you some of our innovative research from both our group and that of our partners. And this will build on some of what you heard earlier and provide some of the evidence about the impact over the life cycle. So rigorous research has demonstrated that public and private investments in programs that serve children and families have exponential returns on investment. We're not the first to have done this. I think people have been trying to do this for a long time, but of course, science evolves, as the last speaker alluded to, with AI, and we can study the mouth. Same thing. We have a lot of new opportunities to understand human development. And we see how those gains both come to individuals as well as the returns to society. So some of you may be familiar with this graph. It's motivated by an array of empirical evidence from studies that we've done and others on human capital programs. So what this graph represents is the return to a unit dollar invested at different ages and the productivity, the efficiency of the return on that dollar invested. So this is not to say that investing early is the only place to that societies and individuals should invest, but really those in adolescence and teenage years and adulthood do matter, but they're more efficient when you're building from a solid base. So the theory of our research on the economics of human development is this technology of skill formation. So our research is unique in that we followed these programs into adulthood and think about how the impacts unfold over the life cycle. And what we see is that these programs are economically efficient and the benefits outweigh the costs in both the short term and the long term. And the effects carry over to siblings, as well as the parents, as well as their own, the children of the children. So in the most simple terms, skills beget skills. That's the concept of dynamic complementarity. That's part an economic concept within the technology of skill formation, and promoting early childhood development is the foundation upon which you're building more human and social capital. And it's the first and most important investment of any future investments, especially for children who are at risk for abuse or neglect. And as such, it should be the first priority. Because we do know that there's a lot of evidence on how neglect and abuse really stunt growth. And when this happens early, before children have had a chance to build skills, it really can inhibit human flourishing. And children are not mini adults, rather these are individuals who are still growing. So the challenges and the opportunities put before them and the environments that they're in are really critical. So in public policy and philanthropy, many programs are going to invest in one particular area, thinking of food insecurity, literacy, early learning and childcare, mental health. But early childhood programs are a place where all of these can be unified. Like the last speaker was saying, nurses will come either to the home or to school. So this is a place where it's economically efficient as well as equitable to promote opportunity and to counter the effects of neglect or abuse. So here first, I'll talk about I'll talk about 3 projects today. This one, the first is from Jamaica and our partners at UCL and the University of West Indies. So if you're not familiar with Jamaica Reach Up and Learn, they did a randomized control trial in the 80s and examined this is an intervention that targeted stunted children in Jamaica. It was a home visiting program for these children who were at risk for low physical development. So it was a nutrition study, but what was innovative is that they added an arm that also looked at what they called psychosocial stimulation. And so it's where a home visitor is working with the parents on child development activities and investing. So they went beyond health, went beyond nutrition, and focused on parenting and interactions when the mothers were, or sorry, with the mothers when the children were between 9 and 24 months old. So we joined with this group when they were following the study up at age 23, at age 31. And what we found was that the participants whose parents received that parenting support, again, not just the nutrition, but also thinking about parents, the gains in IQ as well as cognitive flexibility, they were much higher than those that didn't receive that. We also saw effects on reduced depressive symptoms, lower instances of substance abuse, and lower risk taking. So this was just an hour a week. So how can something so moderate be so important? Again, the cognitive, social, and emotional benefits had a positive impact on education and earnings, and these things compound over the life cycle. And that showed through in the evidence. The participants were more likely to attend college and had 43% higher wages than just the control group. So Reach Up and Learn now has been adapted. It's in many countries. And we are working with a partner in China to study. And again, this is a low cost, high impact intervention that's proven to be really adaptable across a host of cultural contexts. And so we hope to keep working with them and collect additional data about the mechanisms, understanding how these really unfold. So to switch gears, there are 2 studies in the US I'll talk about. Absidarian was a full-day center-based childcare program from 6 weeks up until a child was in school, and it provided a language-rich environment with supportive interactions between adults and the children. They also did feature some health, so meals were provided as well as medical checkups. There was a nurse and a doctor who would come in weekly. So the team, when we were looking it up, we did include the health impacts later, and this is one of the areas where there was a significant return on investment due to the impacts on health. And the program more than paid for itself. Again, people think of it as very expensive. This was full day, full year, when a child was 6 weeks up until school entry. But here you're going to see the benefits are not only back to the parent who was working, not just to society by reducing crime or promoting wages, taxes, but also through the quality of life that the individual, that the child, as they were an adult, obtained. And so this was the first study to think about, to look at the long-term impacts on health. And again, the program did pay for itself. And in public policy, it's important to think about where these things fit. And working parents is something that has always been, it seems a new problem, but or a new development, but it has been there for a long time. And so there are additional health outcomes that are seen. And so those health investments, when the child was early, when they were in the program, they didn't specifically work with the parents, but the children received more health inputs. And so we see that there was lower chronic disease, incidence of obesity, prevalence of risk factors for cardiovascular and metabolic diseases, such as stroke and diabetes. And so these comprehensive programs in early childhood not only increase economic productivity, but also decrease the prevalence of chronic disease and healthcare spending in the long term. And then these gains are passed from one generation to the next. So the return on investment is, again, not just the return to the individual, as it's also the family, it's also the society. And not just economically, also in terms of quality of life. So the final study I'm going to preview is called the Peri-Preschool Study, and we've worked with the High Scope Educational Research Foundation and followed these children up until age 50. And many studies of the long-term early childhood programs, most were studied and run by psychologists. So in working in economics, there's a number of ways in which we take a fresh look. And one of them that I've appreciated, Professor Heckman said, what happened in the classroom? So we went back and we found the teachers, we've talked to them many times and gotten their views on how and why this program had such significant effects. And it was really amazing when they think about field trips and children's experience with the world, with the earth, with their community. And they felt this was important, and they kind of mourn what a lot of childcare programs, for many reasons, these children aren't in environments where they receive the same ability to engage. Sorry, one quick moment. So in the Peri, what was unique, again, in Abecedarian, we looked at health specifically, and in Peri, we were able to collect some data about the children of the children. And we saw impacts. So this, again, increases the rate of return to those original dollars invested. We see that when the children that were in the Peri-Preschool became parents, their children had stronger outcomes. They were more likely to be employed, less likely to be suspended from school, be in better health. And why might that be? Well, the children in the Peri-Preschool program were more likely to be to raise their children in stable households. They were partnered and married. Both parents were in the home. They delayed fertility a bit, had children later in life when, their education and employment was more stable. And the children of those Peri participants then spent 3 times the amount of time in a home with 2 parents through to young adulthood. These results were even more significant for the male participants. So male children of male participants spend about 15 times as much time with stably married parents before they turned 18. So here we can think about early childhood investments, again, the children, the families, as well as the economy. And these programs that I have mentioned were all targeted. The dollars spent were because this was for disadvantaged children across a number of risk factors, and they were trying to close gaps. But I think we need to think more broadly about what is child poverty, and it's about the environments they're in. It's not just income. There are wealthy children who also don't receive the same stimulating, nurturing environment that these children were able to receive through these programs. So policymakers hear the evidence that I've presented, and many, how wonderful. They're excited about early childhood. They want to scale up programs. But the science needs to continue. We need to understand how and why these programs operate, and therefore how to scale them. So when we look deeper, we need to look at the workforce, right? This is a care workforce. We are trying to motivate caring of children through teachers and through parents. So in these programs, it's important for me, I want to point out that workforce was intentionally focused on, and the support of them was focused on. The teachers and mentors in all of those 3 programs were hired from the community. They had some shared lived experience with the families that they served. I think they could see themselves in the families or the children. And so in that way, they really were able to act as coaches or guides rather than just a teacher or thought of as a clinician. Also, their wages were in line with the teachers in primary schools. They had, in the case of Perry, they had flexibility, autonomy, and support to do what they felt was best for the children. So we, in our center, wouldn't say that there's just one specific way that needs to be done with fidelity. I think we think of these interactions and human development as a dynamic process, and it can and should adapt and unfold within a community. I'm a social worker by training. So one of the things that's been clear to me working in this space for 2 decades is, again, just how important being strengths-based through all levels of an organization. And I don't think this is really considered enough or studied enough. If we think about, again, just down from the funder and the policy to the organization, to the service provider, to the parent, to the child. So when we think about investing in the child, we also need to think about how everything else plays a role. And to hold parents and children at the center and to empower them and think about who is the best advocate. And so that's where our evidence right now would point to, and Professor Ekman would argue, working with parents, working with families, that's the most economically efficient place to invest rather than just for example, a childcare center. I will say through our programs, what's interesting is that parenting does improve, for example, in Abecedarian when the parents weren't themselves targeted, I think because a child in that enriched environment, the interactions with adults, then when they come home, they're eliciting different behaviors from their parents. They have different expectations of investment. So enriched early childhood programs, it can be childcare, can be parental supports, mental health, family leave. All of these things are important. And so with this understanding of the economics of human development, I hope you understand more how programs that aim to improve children's welfare do so through a set of outcomes. So it's not just cognitive skills, socio-emotional skills, or health, but all of these put together build over a life cycle, and they really do translate into dollars and cents for families and for societies. And the delay is costly, and this is imperative. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much, Alison. You really have a strong evidence for a very strong message. So prevention is, you could say, an economic obligation for a national state. Yeah, so invest in early childhood. That was what I read from your evidence. So thank you very much. So I think we are approaching the panel discussion.